Welcome, everyone. We're here with Marilyn Honig, Denver Stevo, Juliana Bittencourt will be in and out. She's doing some stuff in the back. And our special guest is Mark Turi. Hi, everyone. And back to you, Marilyn.
Oh, back to me, huh?
Yep.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this lovely Saturday. And we're here to speak about the deep dive into fundamentalism. And we have a very great guest that we had last week talking about Scientology. So, Mark, Mark, if you want to just give us a little introduction and a refresher and who you are and what what you would like to present today, and we'll dive right in.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, my name is Mark Turi, and I'm an ex-Scientologist. I was in Scientology for 3 years, from 2005 until 2008. I spent 2 years as a public, and then in 2007, I joined staff in Berlin. I stayed there for 9 months, and then I spent my last 2 to 3 months in San Francisco. Um, in as a staff member in the San Francisco Day Org. I've been again out since 2008, since May, and I've done lots and lots of different interviews over the years. But just within the past year, there have been a lot more channels and a lot more opportunities to do interviews. So I've been featured on Rachel Bernstein's podcast, Growing Up in Scientology with Aaron Smith Levin, Chris Shelton, Apostate Alex, Doug Scott Kramer's channel. And last week I was my first time on this channel, which I think is really great. And yeah, and I'm really glad to be here. And we kind of have a bit of a different topic this week, but I think it's just as interesting as talking about just Scientology. We're going a little, yes, a little bit more broad, but in the same sense, there's also a lot of overlaying and layover, overlapping. And so I'm just here to say what I learned from taking classes and learning stuff after I left Scientology, especially college level classes in philosophy and religious studies and so forth. And again, yeah, just always happy to be back. It's a really great group of people, and had a lot of positive feedback from people last week. So I'm glad people want to be back, and here I am. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great.
Well, welcome. And what would you just give us a overview, like a loose definition of your view of what fundamentalism actually is? Maybe a few examples, and we can, kind of jump in with our thoughts. And if anybody has a question in the chat, just please put question in all caps so we make sure Juliana can catch it. Or if you have a burning comment you want to make sure that we see, you can put comment. So
Excellent.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. I think when we think of something or someone that's a fundamentalist, we tend to think of someone that is very dogmatic in their view. They mean that they're not open to um, accepting new ideas. They're very strong in their own ways. They tend to be someone that, regardless of evidence, let's say, or regardless of new perspectives or different perspectives, tend not to sway their opinions. They're very stubborn. And also, a fundamentalist can be someone or anyone who has an extreme point of view. And so that could be really about anything if we apply it just generally. But if we're going to use a religious perspective, then if we're talking about that kind of fundamentalism is something really sadly that permeates all religions. It's not something that religion itself, like, because it's such a big topic. But I think it's more of a culture and more of an interpretation that permeates inside of different religions. So when we're talking about Christian fundamentalism, for example, in the US, that's a certain culture that comes from a certain place, comes from certain ideas that might be different from Hindu fundamentalism in India, which does exist. And unfortunately, now the government in India has actually been putting that into effect for many years. So it affects religion, but it does affect politics. It also affects culture. and so on. So it's a very kind of complicated thing, but in the end, it has to do with extremism. It has to do with sticking to one's fundamentals, regardless, not being willing to change. And I also think one of the tenets that we'll find when it comes to religious fundamentalism is, although not all religions have the same characteristics, there are certain things that overlap. There are certain things that are in common. One of which has to be that all religions have usually what are called sacred texts, right? So those sacred texts are different. Usually, some will overlap again with Judaism, Christianity, of course, and Islam. However, regardless of the actual sacred text, the idea is, in a fundamentalist circle, that the texts are interpreted as being literal rather than being allegorical or rather than having some kind of critical outlook. And that is a very, I would say, something that most people in the US might know. If you grew up, for example, in a religious area, or you went to high school or something with religious people. I, in Canada, went to high school with Pentecostals who were very, very fundamentalist. So it's not something that is only in the United States. I just figure probably a lot of people here are from the US. But it tends to be that kind of thing where there is no other interpretation. There's no other way to interpret the scripture, whatever scripture it is, other than everything is literal, and it's not metaphorical, it's not allegorical, it's not a simile, it's not anything else. It's just, and by the way, Scientology actually has a saying that is very interesting to sum up fundamentalism. In Scientology, we're told that if it isn't written, it isn't true, and it isn't true unless it's written. So that's actually a very, very good summation or summary of what fundamentalism means. So you've got to think about the Bible, the Vedas, the sutras, just list the sacred text. If it isn't written in there, then it's not true. And something isn't true unless it's written there. And in Scientology, of course, we take our sacred texts. They're really not, but it doesn't matter. But we take those pseudoscientific textbooks, Dianetics and so forth, as a fundamentalist scripture without interpretation. If we do interpret it differently, we're called squirrels, and there's a whole thing there in SPs and whatnot. But that's basically what it is. It's do we have a literal interpretation of our text, or on the other hand, do we apply criticism? And the criticism actually usually comes from some kind of academic pursuit. It could be science based. It could be social science based, hard or soft sciences rather. It could be literary criticism, history, philosophy, archaeology. And the other thing about criticism is it doesn't necessarily mean that it's all true, okay? But the idea is to pursue what is true, what isn't true, and then to pursue what the people made of the texts when they were writing it. Was it intended to be taken literally, or was it intended to be taken metaphorically? And what we find actually in some biblical texts, we go back many, many, many years, okay? There's actually evidence that says that not every Christian or Jew or Muslim or whatever, if we're specifically talking about the Bible, was taught that it was 100% literal. That actual interpretation is something that is maybe 300 years old, specifically when we're talking about Christian fundamentalism, Protestant fundamentalism, young earth creationism, and so forth. Those are very modern movements, and they only happened as a rejection to the French Revolution and modernity. And I'm someone who studies late modern European history, so the Enlightenment is a little bit before, but it starts around there. And so really these Christian movements that flourished in the United States because they were exiled from Europe mainly, were I guess they were moving there because of these interpretations, and these interpretations are relatively new-ish anyway. I mean, okay, we go back 300 years, right? It's I guess it's what 1723, so maybe 250 years, give or take, right? Give or take a decade. But really, they're modern movements. They're in the English-speaking world mainly, although through missionary work they've spread to parts of South America and Africa and so forth. But they are mainly, something that is Protestant, mainly American or English-speaking, coming from Europe, but then coming across the pond. And it's just interesting in the sense that um, you know, it's not just religion that it affects. It affects culture. It affects people's lives. It affects the law. It affects politics. It can even affect entertainment. How many times have religious groups boycotted films and stuff? It's something that permeates everywhere. So it doesn't just affect religion. It's not harmless. Um,
Mhm.
it is definitely, again, something that can be quite toxic. And it can also, on a personal level, people who tend to grow up in very strong religious households, there tends to be, could be physical abuse, could be emotional abuse, and sometimes black and white thinking and abuse that might take a long time to heal from the trauma. And again, going back to Scientology, it's like pretty much doesn't matter if it's Christian or Hindu or Scientological or Jewish. I mean, there are Jewish fundamentalists. I can tell you a lot about them in my culture, and they do unfortunately express a more abusive, insular type of mentality. So I guess to sort of sum up, um, really, the main point is that a fundamentalist takes the books seriously. I shouldn't say seriously. Everyone takes the book seriously. They take it literally, and then in the end, there's other people that just want to figure out what exactly the authors were saying, why they were saying that, how they were saying that, so on. So it's a little bit nuanced, but I just think the literalist aspect is the key.
Right. Do you think that and just in my experience, I think that the rigidity, the rigid rules, and
Hmm.
the if God says it, I believe it. And do you think that the cognitive dissonance that happens when you can't obey all the rules, or it's just not it's just not like conducive to especially modern life. And I think it's
Hmm.
funny that you said that it's kind of actually evolved more into the fundamentalism in the last 300 years. But
Hmm.
um, I just found myself just feeling like, number one, there were some contradictions. There's a lot of hypocrisy at the top many times, but also just just dividing myself against myself. And we can go into that later of what that's called in different religions, as far as stuffing down your natural the red flags that pop up, your natural inclination to question things. But I guess what my question is, how do you see it as like the the major effects on an individual and a culture of fundamentalism, and why it's so dangerous?
Yeah, that's a very good question. First thing is because it they don't probably know where the actual ideas behind their own interpretations come from. So I think that there is almost always some shocking moments when people who are grown up thinking that their church or their interpretation of the Bible is exactly the way it had been for thousands of years. And then they start to realize that that's not the case. Okay. That, like, if you come from a Protestant church that was started by Martin Luther in I guess he was 1500s, I guess. So I'm going to check my math. I think it's 15 or 1600s he lived, somewhere around there. So like 16th century or maybe before.
Martin
Anyway,
Luther was
I always
15.
forget when he was living.
Martin Luther was 1500s. Yeah, pretty
1500s.
sure.
Okay. So the
Yeah.
1500s is the start of the modern era. The early modern era is 1492, okay? So that's not 2000 years ago. That's not 5000 years ago, right? That's 600 years ago. Or 500 years ago rather. Maybe 4 or 500 years ago, okay? My math is terrible, sorry. But it's relatively recent. And so I think that one of the biggest problems is that people are raised in a particular way to believe particular things that unfortunately are not true. And maybe sometimes it's not innocent, of course. Sometimes it's because some people know and maybe they just want to keep their children in line or whatever, right? But there's a lot of people who themselves are being taught by people who don't know those facts themselves.
Right.
And so it just goes on and on after generation after generation. So again, fundamentalism, yes, there's fundamentalists in the Catholic Church. Mainly their reaction is toward what's called Vatican II, which was like in the 60s. So it's relatively new-ish. But for Protestantism, it kind of starts again with Luther, and then there was a Reformation of the Reformation by a guy named John Calvin, and then he like Presbyterians and Calvinists are very conservative, very strict, and so forth. So then these things flourish and flourish and flourish, and then more communities tend to build, right? It kind of becomes like a web. So I just think that again, it's a lack of knowing where these things come from because of the way people are raised. And I think sometimes, like again, I've mentioned this before, I'm not a parent. I have no idea if I ever will be. So I can't give any parents advice on parenting at all. Like, don't take my advice. But I would imagine that it would be very difficult where if you are parents that are in a particular religion and you want to teach your children that religion, you have to teach them at their level, which means that you're going to have to omit certain things from them and teach them what you want them to be taught, which I think most parents probably do in some way, and then there's variations. But it's like very difficult, right, for people, especially at a young age, to I guess be introduced to some of these ideas. It shouldn't be necessarily. I mean, there's churches that do this, but at least I think it tends to be easier, maybe. And then when people find out, like again, if they go when they go become an undergrad, that's a really big step. You're 18 years old, you get to your undergrad, college, university, depending on what country you're in, and then you're introduced to all these different topics that you wouldn't know before, and maybe you take a science class, and maybe you take a class in the classics, and maybe you take sociology, and they're telling you all these things that you don't know, and one of two things usually happens is people get very angry, right, at their parents, at society, at whatever, or they become very, very like more involved in their own religion. So it's really hard when you talk about like cognitive dissonance because it, it's very difficult for people to see facts in front of their face. It doesn't matter
Yeah.
who you are because everyone kind of has an ego and everyone kind of likes to believe that they're good when we do have bad qualities. And so when someone is shown something that sort of reflects, that they might be wrong or they might not be as good as they think they are, the automatic reaction is to put your own self-worth ahead of that. And it's tough. And I can only imagine in a fundamentalist household, the rules that are being applied are rules that are not thousands of years old. They're rules that are hundreds of years old, but they're interpreted as being thousands of years old. The whole idea of separating men and women, the rules that women have a certain, life and men have a certain life. Sure, like there are interpretations, but then there have been groups over the past that have mixed that way and people don't know about it. So I don't know. I think that fundamentalism becomes a very insular and a very kind of like closed off kind of culture, very tight knit type of culture where people are kind of telling themselves what they already want to know. And the idea of opening up and being what's called cosmopolitan, which just means like if you think of a large city, most large cities in North America and in the world are cosmopolitan because they have many different cultures and religions and so forth. So that's a different experience, right? Fundamentalism is not a cosmopolitan type of culture. It's what we would call a homogeneous culture. It's based on one identity, one set of beliefs, one principles, one kind of people. I know in America, same with Canada, a lot, can be based on race, where everyone in a town can have look exactly the same. And so you might not have the varieties of diversity. And so it is tough. I just think that, and I'm hoping that, as individuals grow up and they grow out of those situations, as they get to higher education, that once they're introduced to this
Yes.
plethora of diversity,
Yeah.
culture, different people, different, genders and or sexual orientations, that people become more open. And generally people do, particularly if they're away from that fundamentalist culture. And that's something that comes across the board. I mean, again, going back to Scientology is very insular, very secluded, emotionally and mentally. And one of the things that fundamentalists may look down on is getting a higher education, or moving to a big
Absolutely.
city, or being part, or going to another church, or having friends of different religions like Scientology, where we're told there are people who of course do get higher education in Scientology, but I'm reminded more of like Jehovah's Witnesses, who are told not to get a higher education in many circumstances, or churches like the Latter-day Saints or other Protestants, where undergrad you go to their college, like you go to Oral Roberts University or you go to BYU,
Yeah.
and then that way you're still in their culture. So BYU is a little bit more cosmopolitan, but not really. I've actually been to the campus, like, yeah, there's people from around the world, but it's still Utah. So you go to like Oral Roberts, or you go to, I think it's Bob Jones University is another one, or you go to a
Yeah.
particular private kind of Christian school, you're still in that mentality of fundamentalism. Um, but breaking out of that is actually, incredibly good. And I personally think, just with the internet and everything, it's probably harder now to stay in a culture like that than it was 20 years ago, or 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, just because there's so much more out there and available to people. But unfortunately, there are still fundamentalists in 2023.
Yeah.
It's
I was gonna say that's watching that Shiny Happy People documentary and learning about Warren Jeffs and the FLDS. Seems like
mhm,
some of those groups are getting tighter, much more homogeneous, locking themselves together,
Yeah.
so they're not
mhm,
going to, and even, I mean, we kind of equate it, when we're in a Scientology conversation, like the Sea Org. You are there. You are 15. You are 30. You are you don't leave. You don't go out of the little world, the little pocket, the little bubble that we've created. And I've seen that with some of those, I guess, stronger fundamental religions, as they've really locked it up. I mean, there are the Mormons, and then there are the FLDS Mormons, and a typical a non-fundamentalist Mormon, you're right. They quite often go to BYU, but really can go anywhere that they want to for school. Move anywhere, get jobs anywhere. Just the central whatever of the religion happens to be in Salt Lake with the Mormon temple. But it as you get more fundamentalist, you get more into that ball, into that you're not going to. You turn 18, well, now you're whatever. Now you're mom. Now you're dad. Go get your job, or get a job within the group. I don't know. It seems interesting to me but I absolutely understand what you're saying. It seems like it does get more. You do get more kind of locked in the orb the more fundamentalist that particular religion is, and less introduced to the outside world, the cosmopolitan world, as you say. So
Yeah, and it's also something because it's by design. I mean, once you
yeah,
leave an echo chamber, just can be any kind of echo chamber, but let's just, again, we're going back to sort of a fundamentalist echo chamber. It's easier to leave once you're out than it is when you're in. So if you
right,
just separate yourself a little bit, and yeah, you move to a certain place or you find a new group of friends, like things change. And people who really believe that like your soul is in danger, okay, if you leave, they don't want you
Yep.
to leave and they want
Yep.
to keep you in, and that is abusive. Because someone who would, we can go on philosophical debates forever, but let's just say someone who is religious but not fundamentalist would say, well, it's your life, like you're not going to hold someone back because it's their life. And even if they're not religious, the same thing. you know People have their own value, people have their own experiences. And so what is toxic is to always keep them in and close to you, because or you don't want them to essentially become themselves. And so again, this can happen with parents, with communities, whatever. You got to cut the cord, you got to give them wings, and they've got to go off and do their own thing. And that can be hard for people, that can be hard for communities and for groups, especially if the underlying idea is if they do something, they're going to like burn and rot in hell. And again, it goes back to such a literalist interpretation that we can argue and debate forever, because I tell people this all the time: I'm Jewish, we don't have a hell. I don't know why Christians have hell. I guess I have to read what you guys call the New Testament. But like, I know Christians who are not obsessed with that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? Like, it's
Yeah.
such a big topic, and it's complicated. But to me, I think that really is like people trying to control others or wanting to control others because they think they have the moral high ground. And again, not always just with religion, but certainly that is a huge part of fundamentalism, because they know what the truth is.
Yep.
They know that they're moral. They know where they're going, right? After they're dead, they know they're going to heaven. They know that when they get there, God is going to throw a party, I guess. And like, they're kind of narcissistic, but they know this. And so if you know something, even though, again, do they really know it? Of course not. But they think that they know it. And so therefore, that any action that they have that removes someone's free will or free choice is ultimately better for that other person. And again, I'm also speaking about Scientology, because the whole
Yes.
the whole thing in Scientology is um, the greatest number for the greatest. What was it again? What did we say? The greatest good for the greatest number.
Good for the great number of
So
people.
yeah,
Yeah.
so if it benefits the community and not you, it's better. So if you're starving but the community is doing better, then it's okay that you're starving. And that's a very reprehensible, misinterpretation of
Yeah.
what's called utilitarianism. But it is something that justifies abuse, basically.
The greater good
Yeah,
idea is
thanks, Marcus.
across the board.
I had a
Greatest good
I
for
had
the
a bit
greatest
of
number
a
of dynamics. There
yeah,
you go.
the
Hey,
greatest good for the
Marcus.
greatest
All
number of
these
dynamics.
Marks
Yeah,
and
thank you,
Marcuses.
Marcus.
Yeah. All these Marks and
Every once in a
Marcuses.
while, I remember these stupid things every day, but when I need to
Yeah.
recall them,
Yeah.
my reactive mind kicks in.
of
Right.
course.
Right.
I'm
Yeah. In
sorry. It's the
Christianity,
only explanation.
it's called either your sinful nature. They call it the old man because there's the old man that you were born with because of Adam and Eve and the apple and all that, and then there's being born again, which is living in the spirit. So you
Yeah.
constantly have that old man, new man, or reactive mind, whatever. It's not reactive mind, back and forth, and usually it's your conscience telling you that something's wrong. Changing his name
Yeah.
because of the Marcus.
Nice.
Changing his name.
Yeah.
That's what it was. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The greatest good for the greatest number of dynamics. Again, it's such a horrible, horrible misinterpretation of John Stuart Mill's utilitarianism. But at the same time, you can take anything and quote unquote bastardize it. It's just interpretation.
He did.
But yeah, I don't.
He
And
did,
again, I don't
yeah.
even think I don't even know if Scientologists even know who John Stuart Mill was or what on utilitarianism is. It doesn't matter, but they think that comes from Hubbard. So that's another example of people
Stolen,
not really
right.
knowing where their ideas are coming from.
Yeah, and I also think not only, you mentioned things like food and things like that. I think also just even your interpretation of certain words, like in Scientology, there's words like ethics is really not what the world thinks is of ethics, and so many different words, like being reasonable is a bad thing. In Christianity, in the fundamental circles that I was in, we had that as well. Suffering was good, and I understand if you're suffering for a purpose that you've chosen, then no pain, no gain. But it was always this flipped, like backwards idea of like treating your kids. This is the child training book that we used in my cult, and also the Duggars used with the blanket training and the beatings and stuff. I always have these next to me now, but this is what we used, and we were told that it was good. I was told that my children were idols and that they were born bad, and it needed to be trained out of them. Even infants and 6-month-olds, which I refused to do, so I'd get in trouble. But as they got older, yeah, I did do certain forms of discipline that I regret now. But I do understand how it can happen because I was told this was the only way, and my own person had been kind of stuffed down, and I just went along with things after a while because I couldn't fight anymore. So I've apologized to my kids 100 times, but I can understand, like, it's easy to look at the fundamentals, the Duggars and all stuff, and say, how could they, or how did that happen, or didn't they know better? Well, yes and no. I mean, so I'm glad that we're tackling this topic because it is something that it has infiltrated across the board many religions and ways of thinking, black and white ways of thinking,
And that's another fundamental parallel. Yeah, black and white. It's
Mhm.
all or nothing. Again,
Yeah.
Scientology says it works 100% of the time if it's applied 100% correctly, and
Yep.
you're either in it or you're not. They don't want anyone who's 50% or even 99% or 2%. You're either 0 or 100. That's it.
Yeah, they had this mantra like, the Bible said it, I believe it, and that's the end of it. So it's like the Bible says it. So yeah,
Wow.
Bible says a lot of things that you get in major trouble with for enacting. Do you mind if we take some questions? I've got some starred questions from Julie. Okay.
Absolutely.
I've got some Scientology questions, but we could go down that rabbit hole all day, and I want to kind of have a mix. So I'm going to start with a different topic. Okay. If we start with Scientology, we'll never come out.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. Joe DeCepo. Hey, Joe. When people say they take the Bible literally, the question is which translation? Hebrew, Aramaic, Koine Greek, Byzantine Greek, Latin, not to mention how the meaning of the English words has changed. Good question.
Yeah, it's a very, very good question. Again, so being Jewish, it's always funny because you guys have the Old Testament, the New Testament. We just have what would be the Old Testament, except because we don't have the New Testament, it can't really be old. So we call it the Hebrew Bible and the Christian Bible. And for us, okay, what's interesting, at least, and it doesn't make it more right or a better translation, but we've had a lot of those ancient Hebrew writings for a very, very long time. And yes, they've been translated into many languages, including English. But a lot of people still can read the classical Hebrew, even though there is still, nobody speaks classical Hebrew anymore. So there's still a disconnection between, modern and ancient. But when it comes to the Christian text, I also find that to be very interesting because from what I remember learning, I believe the Christian Bible, the New Testament, a lot of the stories were written after Jesus had even lived. And then a lot of it had to do with Paul, I think, and how some of the apostles, like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they were Jewish. The first Pope Peter was Jewish, and how, like, there was just discrepancies, and then there were all these different translations. Again, that doesn't mean that it's necessarily all wrong, or that the stories are all wrong if we can take them allegorically and metaphorically. But at the same time, yeah, you have to. I mean, even in our, the Jewish interpretation of the Hebrew Bible, yeah, things change. I mean, it's a long time ago. How many scrolls survived? Who knows? Like, there's a whole bunch of things. But I do find the Christian Bible, the New Testament, to be just very interesting, because yeah, then it's written in Greek, then it's kind of translated to Latin, and then basically no one had a Bible. And then Martin Luther, one of his ideas was every family should have a Bible. So when the Gutenberg press came together, this is what I learned in Germany. So if I'm, wrong on anything, who knows? I could be. But what I was taught anyways was when the Gutenberg press came, Martin Luther wanted to print the Bible so every family would have a Bible. Then he had to translate the Bible. So then he translated it from Greek into German. And then he had to essentially standardize the German language, because he didn't want to print, there's like 100 dialects of German back then. So he wasn't going to do that. And he kind of standardized it. To me, it's just interesting that King James comes along. And of course, after that, there are more modern translations called the International and the New International versions.
Yes.
And like people who are in the evangelical community don't really like the King James Bible, whereas the Latter-day Saints, the Mormons, they only use the King James Bible. They don't use the modern translations. To me, anyway, it's just interesting. Like, again, I don't want to look down on this stuff if someone's a Christian, because at the same time, this is history that we're not in control of. That's the past. Things have gone through different hands and so on. But I just, again, I find it very fascinating. And so, yeah, exactly. Which translation? I mean, I don't know. Can't answer that question. It's just interesting,
I've got some thoughts on that. I'll try to make it brief. But in the second, the first church that I was raised in was more of a mainstream Pentecostal, but still, I believe, little culty. Sometimes very culty, but the actual high control group that I ended up being in for 16 years, it was an offshoot of the mainstream Pentecostal church, Assemblies of God. And this was called Door of Hope. It was the one true church. It was started by a Bible teacher that came out of that church, and she recruited several, disciples, she called them, from 3 different Assemblies of God churches. And how she appealed to us younger people who were still kind of searching. We were in our early 20s and early 30s. And it was like, we're going to roll up our sleeves. We're going to really delve into the Word of God. And we're going to know the truth as God, wants us to know and interpret it. So we all had stacks of Hebrew Greek lexicons, Spurgeon books, all kinds of commentaries, and it was based on these lexicons. And I remember, for example, there were 3 words for love, right? There's agape, which is God's love. There's philo, which is like Philadelphia came from, brotherly love, and then there's eros, which is like romantic love, right? So you could spend your entire life delving into all of these commentaries and everything, and still not really be living, not really know, quote, the truth. And I think that there's certain things, no matter what translation you look at it, okay, where it says that homosexuals and different types of people will be thrown in the lake of fire. Now, there's a different phrase for those, but lake of fire is lake of fire. Okay. So when it just angers me when people say, like, when, one of the questions of, billion-dollar questions is, if God is love, why is there hell? And people say, there's usually two pat answers to that. One is, well, it depends on how you interpret the Bible. And I was like, but the Bible says it, And then there's another one that says, well, you're choosing that. Like, God is love, But if you don't choose God's love, you're going to hell. Now, that sounds a little bit narcissistic anyways. So it's like there's somebody who loves you, but if you don't do what they say, curtains, right? So that was always something in my mind that I had to just stuff down, put in the back of my mind, not like I could never figure that out. So anyways, that's a long answer to the interpretation thing, but I think some things just can't be interpreted in a nice way, you know? So either you just say it's an allegory or you stuff it down, you know?
People have to do that. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. I don't know if Poe is still with us, but it says, Poe wants to go Clearwater Chad. Want to read it?
Sure. Clearwater Chad, dogma is the toxin every faith has to fight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So religious dogma, if you want to speak on that, Mark.
Yeah.
What
Dogma, again,
is.
dogma is the idea of a like a very strong, fervent, kind of stubborn idea that everyone has to follow. And yeah, dogma is the toxin every faith has to fight. Yeah, dogma, it's sort of a false sense of confidence, I think, as well. That's a big part of it.
That's a good
But
point.
yeah, dogma, fundamentalism, they're very related. I know that they're very different, of course. There is such a thing as fundamentalist dogma, which is the worst of two worlds. But at the same time, yeah, dogma is like, no, these are the rules. Again, we're stubborn. We are not welcoming. We are, because that's the way that it says it, and then they project that. And again, it is that rigidness, or maybe we can invent a word, the rigidicity of the faith.
Rigidity. I don't even know if that's a word.
Rigidicity.
Yeah. I don't know if it's a word or not, but it should be rigidicity or rigidness of that particular
Rigidity.
thing. Yeah. And Dogma's a part of it. Also a great movie, of course, but with Kevin Smith's movie. But yeah,
I was going to say, I thought Poe just had
walk.
Yeah, I was just
they
going to
walk
say
hand in hand.
Poe had a thing against Kevin Smith, but go ahead. Sorry, I was just interrupting.
Okay,
no, it's okay.
People are starting to, have like questions. So you must be provoking some thoughts, thought-provoking questions.
Good,
so
yeah.
This is great. So Ron Mowgli, the questions is for the experts, but I believe Chris Shelton spoke about this, about how the contradictions are so confusing and create a word salad, which makes the followers easier to control. And I'm just going to put his second part of his statement. And always the reader is at fault. Didn't understand, didn't apply correctly, need to read another policy. Yeah, It's like that in Christianity sometimes too.
Wow.
Yeah. It is like, again, yeah. It certainly is like that. That is definitely a tenet that a lot of these groups follow for sure, because again, it's pointing the blame, right? Like this text is perfect and flawless. So yeah, if you don't understand it, it's your fault, and yeah, it's not a good thing. That's very toxic.
Yeah, like the word salad. That's a really good point. Definitely.
Yep.
Okay, let's take on Scientology. Free Xenu Project. Anybody else want to read this, or you want me to just keep reading?
I'll read it.
Free Xenu Project says question. I get confused about everyone, or I get confused because everyone says that LRH writings are literal and must be followed literally. However, there are so many writings that conflict and go directly against another. This is one. There's a 2 here somewhere, isn't there? I saw it earlier. 2. How does a devout follower of Scientology deal with those things in their head? Yeah, how do you deal with the conflicts between the writings that you told are flawless and must be followed literally?
So in that case, it's a lot of mental gymnastics. You're basically told that if there's a conflict in the policies, you take the later policy. So L. Ron Hubbard writes policies from the 50s all the way, whatever. So you take the one that's the latest. However, it's not always easy because he's written so many things to make those comparisons. So sometimes you're following a policy because you think it's the latest policy, because it was, like I mentioned last time, there's staff status courses, 0, 1, and 2, and in 1 and 2, you start reading these policies, but then you find out that there are policies that are after those policies. So it's by design. Like it's not a coincidence. They're teaching you things, and then they're omitting certain things. For what reason? Well, it's because it's always your fault. So you didn't look in the right place. There's always a later policy. Why didn't you find that later policy? And then you think to yourself, you just taught me this policy that was dated in the 60s. Yeah, but there's one from the 70s. Yeah, but I didn't know that. Oh, but that's your fault. So that's kind of how it goes. And you can spend a lot of mental hours, especially on staff, working through those questions that you didn't know that you should have asked, but you should have asked them. So not, again, going back to toxicity and all that kind of stuff. It's just a way to keep people controlled, essentially.
I think Marilyn's muted.
I'm unmuted. Sorry. I am muted. Sorry. I'm not sure I totally understand this question, but Mark, Clearwater Claire, the Taylor question, is that Protestant in America only? Because I thought it went back later in the UK. Not sure.
I'm not sure. I mean, Protestantism in general starts in Germany, and it's in England, it's in Scandinavia, it's in some of the Baltic states. There's Protestants in Hungary, Romania. But the most, I believe, the largest is in the U.S., which, from what I understand, and then of course Australia. Although Canada, we have Protestants, but they're minority and whatever. But yeah, I don't really know. Maybe fundamentalism. I mean, fundamentalism, again, is very prominent in the United States in certain areas. But there are fundamentalists in England and Australia and South America and Africa and.
How do you define
Europe,
Protestant?
Even,
Because I was always under the impression that either the Catholic or you're Protestant, because Martin Luther, there's the word protest in the word Protestant, and if you're not Catholic and you're still religious, you believe in the tenets of the Bible, you believe in faith, salvation through faith and not works, then you're Protestant. Is that how you see it?
I mean,
like all the different denominations.
The original Protestants basically differentiated from the Catholics in Martin Luther's 99 thesis or 95 thesis. 95? I was getting mixed up, but essentially, 95. Was it 90?
It was 95. Yeah,
95 thesis. The long and the short of it is, they omit priests. So there's more of a relationship between you and God. There's no penitence, all this kind of stuff.
Right.
Today, if someone is considered to be Lutheran, Anglican, Methodist, Baptist, Unitarian, Universalist, Pentecostal, I think also Mennonite Amish, which are called Anabaptists, and then there's also, the Brethren Church. So there's quite a few of them, and it usually has to do with and Presbyterians and Calvinists and the Reformed Church is another thing. They all differ mainly on the way they're organized, and then little things like what are the age of baptism. But back in the day, to separate themselves from Catholics, it was like if you were Catholic, you went to the cathedral. God spoke to the priest, you spoke to the priest, and the Bible was in the church. And the Protestants said, no, there can be more of a personal connection. I also know many people who will say that Protestant churches themselves are not as elaborate as Catholic churches, because Catholic churches, there used to be, maybe they still are, I don't know, lots of gold and a lot of just paintings, gorgeous stuff, right? But Protestants tend to be more, simple. There might not even be crosses in certain Protestant churches, So it's just a different thing. But today, again, if you are, there's Catholic, there's Protestant, and then of course there's the Orthodox churches, and then which is mostly in Central Eastern Europe, and then there's also non-denominational. But non-denominational will usually grow out of a Protestant church.
Yeah.
Usually.
They usually consider themselves yeah, I mean, we considered ourselves Protestant because we weren't Catholic,
Yeah.
and we used
And
a
then the
lot of,
Orthodox Church,
hymns.
because there's different Catholic churches, but the Orthodox Church is basically very similar to Catholics, except priests can marry, which was a big part of that. And then happened in like
Yeah.
1154 or something like that, the Great Schism, or 11 something. Some again, forgive me, a historian who can't remember dates. But that's me. But no, I just can't. Couldn't recall. I think it was 1154, something like that. But yeah, they had a bit more reforms, but essentially they're very similar to the Catholic Church. And then within the Catholic Church, there are different Catholics. So there are the Greek Catholic Church, and the Greek Catholic Church started in the Austro-Hungarian Empire when the Empress Sisi went to the Greek Orthodox churches and said basically in the empire, and basically said, we want you to follow the Pope. We don't care what rituals you do, just follow the Pope. And they said, sure. So they follow the Pope, but they do Orthodox rituals. Anyway, I like these little nuances in religion. I think they're very peculiar and very nice and funny sometimes. But yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So Free
So-
Xenu
so-
Project. Oh, go
Oh,
ahead.
I was just going to say that last question was the last thing was a clarification from Claire about how
Yes.
she thought it went back further than the 1500s.
Oh, did I miss that?
Oh,
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Martin Luther pounded the 95 Theses to the whatever door. He pounded them
Sure. Right.
in 1517. So nothing
Yeah.
started
Yes.
before then, as far as an organization of Protestantism or
there was a gentleman, and this is just they call them proto-Protestants. His name is Jan Hus, and he was in the Bohemia, so he was in the Czech Republic. So he is actually not considered necessarily a Protestant, but he was like the first person who made a church in a Catholic area that then rebelled against the established Catholic Church. And
Oh.
there's a battle that I think he died in battle. Yeah. Anyway, that happened a little bit earlier, but between Hus and Martin Luther and then John Calvin and so forth,
Right.
basically from the late modern or from the
Wesley.
early modern era, like 1400s ish after, that's where Protestantism begins. Yeah.
Wow.
Right, and there was John Wesley, and I forgot it was Charles Wesley.
John Wesley, George Fox.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot. He's the Quaker guy, and the Methodists, and all of them are up there in England, and then they all come over to America, basically.
So we have Free Xenu Project, Mark. Your reactive mind is actually a good thing. You need critical thinking to avoid being in a cult or to get out of one.
100%. I agree with you.
Right.
Yeah. Reactive mind doesn't exist, but the part of your mind that exactly does. So
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
This is a good point. Free Xenu Project coming to the table with so much wisdom here. Comment: the Old Testament tells you to take an unruly child to the edge of the town and stone them. Is that something you're going to do? I can go on and on and on. Absolutely. On this topic of the Bible says, absolutely. And then what they'll say to that Free Xenu Project is, well, the New Testament fulfilled the law of the Old Testament. They don't necessarily say that was a bad thing to do. They just say, well, you don't have to do that anymore because when Jesus came, he fulfilled the law and the prophets. And it's supposed to be love your neighbor as yourself, and that fulfills the law and the prophets, But yeah, there was a lot of harsh stuff that went on. I've told this story before about how, there was this kind of Old Testament reenactment going on in our cult, and there was this mystical kind of laying on of hands, and we can go into that kind of thing later about how fundamentals and mysticism kind of sometimes collide, especially in the Pentecostal church, with this prophetic gifts of the gifts, and that basically raises somebody on a different level, so that if there is interpretation to be had, it's usually these dogmatic rulers, these rulers that have, these leaders that have put themselves up over the people. And that's when you get a full-blown cult, when you have a charismatic leader that's dictating. So, I was told I had a spirit of this, a spirit of that. There's this terrible Bible story about Achan in the Bible, about this guy that took the spoils from the battle, hid it under his tent. And that's the kind of allegory kind of thing when you're talking about like demons or somebody's heart. They would like delve something from the Old Testament and accuse you of that. And you don't have any proof, I mean, I didn't know what the heck that meant, but just to take the pressure off me, I would confess. And it just reminds me of like the auditing and the sect checking and everything in Scientology, where I've heard people say that they've just given false confessions because they couldn't leave the room. It's just so messed up. It's just awful. Yep.
Yep.
And Theta. Yeah. And Theta. Hey, Marcus, I wonder where there is a reference for toothpaste in Scientology. Probably.
I missed that one. Maybe
Yeah.
the cleaning manual. Maybe the cleaning manual, which is 250 pages long, but I read it once and I didn't remember toothpaste. So
That's funny. It's
Is
a
there
good one.
considering Ron's teeth? Maybe there's not.
Right. I think that's what he's getting.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
This
That's funny.
is a good question, too.
Very smart.
Lone Dinosaur 13. I will never understand how a baby is born bad unless maybe they're a sociopath.
Good comment.
Yeah.
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 Nobody's going to take that one.
No,
Yeah,
well,
no,
I
that's-
think
how could you
that's our
disagree?
answer, right? It's a ridiculousness, and
Yeah.
how do you know? I mean, even is it sociology, or psychology? You don't even know that you can't even define a psychopath until somebody's mind has developed and they're 17, 18, 20 years old. So
Yeah.
how do you know? I mean, are they born bad? Are they developed bad? I mean, that's a much longer question, but you're right. The idea of being born bad is, just across the board. Hey, you're a baby. You're born bad. It's just
Yep.
effing ridiculous.
Yeah, it is. I agree.
Rosemary's Baby, the only one I know of.
Yeah, well,
Right.
Also Damien.
No,
Damien too. They were a little special, but that's true.
right.
Well, also fictional characters, but
Right.
that's what makes them special.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were taught that because of the fall of man, the fall of man in the garden, if you take everything literally, it was about 8,000 years ago that God created the earth in 6 days. He rested on the seventh day. On the sixth day, he made Adam out of dust, and he made Eve out of Adam's rib. And they were happy. They were in the garden. They were naked. And then the serpent, who was Lucifer, the fallen angel, he came slithering over to. I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh. If anybody believes this, I respect that. But I'm just saying, this is what people sometimes take literally. This is what I was told actually happened 8,000 years ago. Then she was tempted by the serpent. She took the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and gave it to Adam, and he ate it. And all of a sudden, their eyes were opened. They saw that they were naked. They ran from God and hid and put fig leaves on them. And he was very angry, and he cursed them. And Adam had to toil the ground for, his whole life. And that was the curse of man. So the man has to go out and work, and women have to bear children. And all of a sudden, they have horrible, painful childbirth. And then children are born evil. And then you got Cain and Abel, and you got, through the bloodline. And come the New Testament, there was a solution. And, Jesus died for our sins. And I totally respect that. I don't know if I believe that anymore. I really, really, really did before. And I don't think there's anything wrong with believing in that. But if you go around telling people that they're going to hell if they don't say the sinner's prayer and become born again right now, come to the altar and, throw themselves to the altar and confess their sins, and they're living under this cloud of going to hell, that's just not okay. That's not okay in my book. And it took many, many, many years for me to not have that hanging over my head daily. So I don't know where I got on that, but
Yeah.
No,
I went to a very laid back Lutheran church when I got baptized, and I just realized that when we went to, and maybe it goes back to Mark, what you were saying earlier, and and kind of how to raise a child with this information. we were taught this as literal, as kids, right? As at 6, 7, 8 years old, there was a snake that dangled an apple, and Charlton Heston parted the Red Sea, and all of this stuff, right? I mean, all of this was, Noah threw all these animals into a damn boat, and who knows? And maybe some of this was actually happened. Maybe Noah did make a big boat. I don't know. And Hollywood doesn't help, right? I mean, Hollywood, all the movies are, Noah is a movie about a guy making a boat, and and Charlton Heston does part the Red Sea and all of that. So, but that's how. But Hollywood aside, that's how we grew up. So, it took me, and then I was baptized, and then I kind of stopped really thinking about it for a while, and then when I started thinking about it again, I'm like, snakes don't talk. What the hell, And so, Charlton Heston's not that old. I don't know, but I don't know. I don't know how that plays into it. If that, if sometimes if that helps create or ultimately add fuel to fundamentalist religions, because that's how children walk out of Bible school, is thinking that snakes talk and dangle apples in front of you. I don't know. Anyway, that was just my insight that kind of popped up when Marilyn, when you were talking there too, you just this following, this very literal following of all of this. Cain did kill Abel. It's brother killing brother. And again, some of these things could have happened, and some of these things, I guess they could have. I mean, I guess maybe snakes talked 8,000 years ago, but I don't know. Plus the fact that, archaeology proves we're a little older than 8,000 years too. So who knows?
A little,
a couple years. Yeah, 95 million years, in fact, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, the Homo sapiens are 200,000 years, roughly.
Right.
From the Horn of Africa, which would also be very strange because of Adam and Eve would have been sub-Saharan African descent. Yes. And the Garden of Eden would have been in parts of either Ethiopia or in the northern part of Uganda. And then, of course, that would just make the tragedy of racial slavery from a Christian interpretation be very strange, because they would be basically just, locking the descendants of Adam and Eve in ships and whatnot. Like, again, we can go on for days, but it's just,
Yeah. You can get into Noah, right? Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And Shem was where the Semites came from. And Ham was where he populated Africa. And then Japheth was Europe. And so, but the chosen... And the Tower of Babel, right? Tower of Babel, that was the languages getting all mixed up. Because people got together, they spoke the same language and built this Tower of Babel, and God mixed up their languages so that they couldn't, basically, overtake. I don't know what, but he wanted them to be separated. Yeah.
I find too what's. Sorry, Marilyn. I'm very sorry.
No, go ahead. I was just going to read the comment, but go ahead along those lines. Go ahead.
I was just going to say it's interesting too, because when you talk about things like original sin, this is kind of an interesting thing. So a lot of the stories that we just talked about are from Genesis, and Genesis is again part of the Hebrew Bible. So they're my stories and my culture. Mm-hmm. But we don't, at least when I was growing up, we never really talked a lot about that stuff that much. I find there's certain aspects of the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, like Genesis, that are way more talked about in the Christian community than in the Jewish community. Obviously, we focus probably more on Exodus because we have Passover.
Right.
So, but it's just interesting. I don't know. It's just a different thing. Like the concept of original sin is a different interpretation. Even the most orthodox of Orthodox Jewish people would believe, and again, I'm not part of this, but they would believe in what's called old earth creationism. So they would say, okay, God created the world and the species, but it happened longer than 8,000 years ago. So if science says billions, then fine. They would still not believe that we're descended from, primates and whatever, and that people have, that species have common ancestry, which is nonsense, of course. But they wouldn't say we were created in 6 24-hour periods, 6 to 8,000 years ago. Like it's just different. And I just find, again, when a lot of Christian literalism is sort of borrowing from like the texts that we read, and that's not our interpretation, which again is
Right.
because it's a different culture, it's a different history, it's different. And again, just wanted to sort of point that out too, that even within other cultures that use the same book, there's still thousands of ways
Yeah.
that we can interpret those books. So
Yeah, and there's also the school of thought that they bring up the scripture that says a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is like a day to God.
Yeah.
So that's how you can like explain stuff away, the creationism versus science. But even so, it's there's so many different things that can't be explained by the Bible. That's for sure. But Jeff's comment was, what Marilyn is describing is the major reason that when I study the Bible, I look at it as more parables and allegory to learn from and guide my life to a better place and a more positive path. Yep. And that's kind of what you were saying, Mark, about, the literal translations versus even, back when, before that whole, boom of the fundamentalism came about, that people were more like, these are stories that were passed down that will, give you like an example or an allegory. And Jesus told parables. So
yeah, and again,
Mark,
one of the things is,
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Just very quickly, just because when we talk about some of the more horrific things in the Bible, I don't know why they're there, but they're there for a reason. And it could be literally because our version of morality today is very different. And so there is a school of thought in history that says it's like, if we're going to take a relativistic approach, that it's difficult to assert our own morality from today onto the morality on the people of the past, which to me makes sense. Of course, now there's some things that were horrific. We can say that were horrific, and maybe they always were. However, the big thing is saying, like, they had to lead their own lives. Their lives were so totally different from the lives we lead today that for whatever reason, they put in these horrible things, probably to make it the simplest way for people to just behave. And then later on, it's possible that people looked at that and were probably like, yeah, we don't believe in that anymore. And then as time went by, when the literalism approach came back in, they reinvigorated all that horrible stuff. But it's actually very, very common for probably over 1,000 years that there was many Christians in the medieval era, especially, that probably, they didn't believe in young earth creationism. They didn't have the science we had today. So they couldn't put it into words. Like they didn't have that. So again, yeah, it's probably better in one way to look at it as a parable, but even still acknowledging that there are horrific things, and why were those horrific things there? We can't ignore them. So to ignore them by saying, well, this later policy, in Hubbard's terms, well, that just contradicts whatever I'm saying, I'm still a good person. No, we want to know why those things were there. Stoning, throwing people into like just horrible things. They were there for a reason. Let's look what that reason is. Let's try to make it contextual in a historical perspective. So it's not the end of the discussion, it's the beginning of the discussion.
I had always wondered if and this is me, not any sort of, knowledgeable research, but if when the Old Testament was written, if it was written as more of a, because the Old Testament is much darker. If that was written as some sort of, I don't know, a guideline for control, or hey, if you do this, this will happen, to keep it. And then the New Testament was, a different school of thought altogether to maybe bring people back together. But I don't know. I don't know that to be the case. Let me ask: is there any sort of research or thought process on the when the Old Testament was written as opposed to when the New Testament was written, if there was, a significant gap of time between there. I'm sure that it's hard with all of the revisions and things have started to, they're kind of rewritten to kind of flow together and to fit together. But is there any sort of thought process on maybe first part versus second part?
I've learned this recently, and again, I'm kind of forgetting exact dates, but the one thing to note is that neither the Hebrew Bible, Old Testament, or the Christian Bible, New Testament, were written after the stories took place. And so it seems to be that they were written by people who had probably compiled different stories from multiple sources, written by multiple authors. And so even Genesis and stuff like that, there might have been some scrolls around and things like this, but like they were compiled into those books after. And that's when, in the Middle East had so many conquerors coming in, and people leave their cultures when they conquer. So the Assyrians came, and the Babylonians came, and the Persians came, and the Greeks came. They leave their culture, and part of that, one time that some of these conquerors came in, the idea was to get together and to bring all the stories together and then build the temple and all this kind of stuff. So there was always an outside motivation, but it wasn't like, okay, like, somebody just said we're going to put it all together now. It was more for survival. It was more because they had all these different interpretations and authors, so they just compiled everything. But again, it's after the fact. So I don't know. Let's just say the Genesis was supposed to take place, or Exodus was like 5,000 years ago. It's like at least a couple centuries after the fact, and even for several centuries, even maybe a millennia after the fact, when those texts were compiled. And from what I understand in the Christian Bible, um, New Testament, it was fairly much after, at least by decades, because some of the apostles were still alive when Paul was gathering some of the stuff, and then there was continuity and all this kind of stuff that the apostles actually knew what Paul was doing and were reading some of his stuff and kind of thought, I don't really know. So again, it's a lot of after the fact, and yeah, that then lends itself to having different interpretations, misinterpretations, or the stories get elaborated and they get built upon by different people. Like I don't think that there is, and I could be wrong, but I highly doubt that the original scroll, if this is a literal thing here, the original scroll or whatever, 10 commandments on the stones that Moses brought down from Sinai, probably didn't happen in that way, but they haven't been preserved, so we don't know what those would look like. We can't date them. So again, I think it makes more sense to say that the people who believed in this religion, or the people who believed in this culture, they're the ones who were the authors of the religion, especially from a Jewish perspective. Now, I don't know about Christians, but maybe, but they authored these stories, whether they were literal or not. Maybe there was a Moses, maybe there was an Abraham. I don't know. I have no idea. But they authored these stories, they compiled these stories, again, under the necessity of surviving, because after being conquered by so many foreign people, they needed to have their own identity. We needed to have our own nation. We needed to have our own community. And because we were being conquered so many times by everyone around us, it started to build more around these stories. And those stories, like it said in the previous comment, maybe they were taken literally, maybe they weren't taken literally. That wasn't the point. The point is that they were our stories.
Yeah.
And they were about our people, whether we created them or whether they were actual human beings, doesn't really matter. But then we had our own version of God when everyone else had thousands of God. We had one, so we were a little bit different. We had a little thing going on. So it helped us survive. So regardless, you know, of how literal we're supposed to interpret those things, we're still here. Being Jewish goes back a long time. I don't know if I could say 5,000 years exactly, but at least 3 or 4,000 years. And so, at least for us, those stories and that culture that's around it and the rituals that we do, that to me is more important than whether or not, again, something is literal or allegorical or whatever. That's just the fact that they've survived, and just the
Yeah.
fact that we're still here is pretty unprecedented considering the history. So, and in Judaism, it's a little different from Christianity. Many Christian churches, of course, although I'm sure not all of them do, but many look for converts. They don't really care what ethnicity you are, what language you speak, whatever. Judaism, we're called an ethnic religion. So we have our own little ethnic group. And yeah, you can convert because there is a religious aspect. But normally people are born into it. And, you know, there's just a different thing going on. We don't go to different places and hand out flyers of why Moses was so cool. Like, that's not something we do. And it's okay, because this one of the reasons why Christianity and especially Islam are so successful, why over 50% of the world believe in those two different religions, is because they've been missionary. They've done missionary work. There's not a lot of Jewish people in the world, so we tend to be more insular and, you know, can be a little bit more secular or whatever. We definitely have a smaller number. So anyway, the
Right.
thought concluding being that I think it's a different perspective, but I think the stories are, and the rituals, the fact that they've survived is more important than their literal authenticity, if that's what you want to say. Whereas
Sure.
maybe in some Christian churches, the focus is on being literal, because the more
Yeah.
literal it is, the more true it is, the more strong someone is in their faith, and that way they get to
Yes.
heaven. But it's
Yeah.
different in other religions. That's all. It's just different. Yeah.
No, fair enough.
Yeah.
Free Z News Project brought up a point about this as well. Anyone that wants to read an interesting book on the origins, Caesar's Messiah by Joseph Atwill. You can listen to it, but it's hard with all the comparisons. Better to read. So I guess this kind of discusses the origins of these as well. But yeah, I agreed. At the end of the day, it's about the stories. It's about the metaphors. It's about kind of what really I think what unifies. I mean, there's so many, and not just talking about the three, right? Christianity, Judaism, and Muslim, which obviously have a very there's a kind of a core there, but even those that I don't even know what that name is for it, but even the other religions out there, there's such a unification. There's a point to it, right? There's at the end of the day, it's not about scaring and killing each other, but it's about it's about us as people and what brings us together and what we can learn from, right? I think the metaphor is that. So if that sentence made any sense, I don't know. I'm trying, guys. I'm trying.
No, you're doing well.
Very good, very good.
Well,
It's
the
pretty
word
deep.
religion,
Lord-
religion comes from the Latin. I think it's religio, something like this, and it means to unite. So
Okay.
you're on exactly what it's supposed to be. Religion
Thank
is
goodness.
supposed to unite, and when it doesn't unite, it's not technically religion. So it's little ironic kind of thing there too.
All right. Thank you for the super chat.
Thank you.
Thank you, OBG Foster. Bart Ehrlman's books are great. Are great read dates. So dates for the creation piece there. I just wanted to bring this one back up really
Oh,
quick.
sorry.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
all right.
Marcus.
Hands off.
Reactive mind is framed because it's sometimes responsible for bad decisions. Sometimes things are super critical. Ask Poe on the go. Every day have to make super critical decisions, right? Yeah.
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 Jesus, as a cop, no doubt, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
cops, firefighters, doctors. I mean, these people having to make these super critical decisions, right? I'm a supporter of the reactive mind. I think our Xenu, our Lord and Savior, for bringing us here to this prison planet and giving us what makes us unique. So this is the one I just want. This is the one I just wanted to quote from Lori Plays saying, "Mark, I could listen to you all day." Right?
Same here. Yep.
Right?
My
Absolutely.
throat though.
Yeah.
I know.
Oh, yeah,
gotta-
yeah, yeah.
I gotta figure out. I gotta
Yeah.
get well lubricated. I forgot to buy cough drops. Normally I stick a bunch of Ricolas in there, but yes, thank you. Not very many people have said that to me in my life, so I appreciate the comment. Thank you.
Comment from Joe DiCeppo. The apple in the Adam Eve story was originally different fruit lost in translation.
Yeah.
The apples hadn't yet made it from their native Central Asia to that part of the world back then. So
Well,
kiwi, the snake made Evie. No, that's
I've
translatable.
heard it could be pomegranate or
Oh.
persimmon or something like that.
Oh,
Wow.
you're muted, Malin.
Those pomegranate seeds would make anybody sin.
Yeah, I love this one. Okay. Who's cooking?
I guess you are.
I'm not touching anything.
Okay.
Give me Julie.
Joe DeSebo, question: why can't we build the Tower of Babel? We call it Babel, but Babel. Answer: Babel, 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 Babel. Right? They couldn't communicate to build it. Yeah.
Wow.
And
Yeah,
this one.
that's an interesting one too, because just very quickly, of course, languages have been very, very much influenced on evolution. So, of course, languages have common ancestors. So, if we're talking about languages like Hebrew and Arabic, they have a common ancestor. English and Hindi have a common ancestor. And what I learned, Hungarian does not have a common ancestor with any of our neighbors, but we do have a common ancestor with Finnish, and on and on and on. And that was because of evolution. They didn't even know that things could have common ancestors. And Charles Darwin came out, and then all of a sudden after that, linguists were put together. And there's no evidence that like every language in the world has the same common ancestor. But, who knows? Maybe there is a language that's buried somewhere under mounds and mounds of dirt that, links all of us. Like, I don't know how many Star Trek fans we have in the audience, but there was an episode of The Next Generation when the Klingons, the Romulans, the Vulcans, the humans go onto a planet. They meet a changeling, and the changeling says, "We're all from the same gene pool," because whatever. Who knows? You never know.
Yeah. So Marcus says, go all the way back to Abraham. I'm unalive my son because God told me. Today we call that unaliving. Really bad. Yeah, I mean, I can speak to this briefly. Is obviously my cult leader didn't say to do that to your kids, but allegorically, yeah, it was said that you lay your children on the altar, and they can be idols to you. So you're giving them up to God. You're training them. You're teaching them. You need to apply the rod, spare the rod, spoil the child. But that said, they did believe that God actually told Abraham to do that to do that to his son, and it was a test. Now, I don't really think that that's very nice of God to do that, but what do I know? I was raised in a cult. This wasn't in reference to the day is like 1,000 years, like not actually having an actual day that each part of the world was, or each type of animal, humans, everything was created by God in each day.
Mm-hmm.
So it said just the order. What if he used the Big Bang to do it? My personal thoughts. I homeschooled a couple of years, so I taught creation and evolution, and we discussed it.
Yeah, I mean, again, I talked about this before, but it looks like, at least until there are better evidence and theories, which can happen, that it looks like the Big Bang is probably how the universe came to be. I'm not a physicist or astrophysicist, so I'm not even going to pontificate or even get into that stuff. And then we have evolution, we have a common ancestor and stuff like that. But if that's the way it is, that's the way it is. So a lot of people who are believers or who are religious will just say like, yeah, that's how it is. That's how it is. I want to bring up, I think about 20 years ago, there was a county in Pennsylvania, Dover County. Maybe this might sound familiar. That were trying to replace science textbooks with a textbook that was created by the Discovery Institute that was teaching intelligent design, and they went to court. Many religions, like the United Methodist Church, the Reform and Conservative Jewish congregations, Unitarian Universalists, and Roman Catholics in the area wrote to Dover County to say they don't want to have their children who are religious to be taught creationism in high school because it violates their religious rights. And so, as someone who is a part of the conservative Jewish movement, if I had children and they were being taught intelligent design, scientific creationism, and not good actual science, it would actually violate my religious beliefs. So that might sound very strange to some people, but it's a reality that millions of people in the U.S. and all over the world would agree with me, because not being a Christian, and also for those who are Christians who don't follow young Earth creationism, teaching that religious interpretation is a violation of your own personal beliefs.
Right.
So, especially
Absolutely.
in a public school.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's a compliment for you, Mark. Comment: Marilyn's guests are always fascinated. Actually, I think it was Chad's guest, right?
Well, we're all a team, though.
Yeah. But thank you, Joe. Yeah,
Thank you, Joe.
we're very
Thank you,
grateful.
Joe.
Yeah, we're very happy that Mark joined us.
Absolutely.
And we've had quite a few great guests so far popping in our streams, so we're really excited. We've had both of the degraded daughters of Dianetics, and we've had AA Ron popped in our stream Monday night. That was exciting. And during the chatathon, we had a whole lineup, so that's pretty great.
Yep.
That was excellent. Okay,
I'd love to be on the next one, as I mentioned last time.
Absolutely. Yes,
Definitely.
Yes, you'll be first choice. Statement: this channel has some great videos on the history and writings of religions and history in general. I'm not sure what channel they were.
This channel.
Oh, that channel. Oh, never mind.
At Useful Charts.
Charts. Okay. Great.
Nice.
All right.
I will check that out. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. John T.
Nice.
Okay. I'm not sure.
I can answer this.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
I sort of know, but not
so
really.
when the Catholic Church was converting the Germanic peoples to Christianity, normally Christmas was celebrated in the spring, but they wanted it to coincide with a Germanic pagan moon festival, I believe, the solstice. Yeah. And so the church moved Christmas to the 25th of December to appease the newly converted Germanic pagans. There you go. Yep.
Nice.
That's fun. It's good.
Interesting.
To me.
George Massey comments, the Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco is an excellent and entertaining book. Book much better than the movie. Not that the movie with Sean Connery is bad by any means. To begin to understand how the Catholic Church edited and rewrote the scripture during the Dark Ages to suit their own means. Yes. I'm trying to remember. Umberto Eco wrote a bunch of stuff in second person, which makes his readings even more interesting. But I don't remember if the Name of the Rose was written in second person or not. Being instead of I or they, being you. So essentially telling, you are an active participant in the story. But anyway, even if it's not, Name of the Rose, recommended. But I will also say not a quick read. Not a quick read. So,
Pastor Alex is in the house here.
Pastor Alex.
Hey, Alex.
Comment from Joe. Because I'm a language geek. All right. English and Hindi are from the Indo-European language family. Hungarian and Finnish are from the Ugaric language family. Right. There we go.
And Hebrew and Arabic are from what's called oh Lord. Asiatic? Not Austro-Asiatic. I can't remember now. Oh my God, my brain is just not working today. I don't know why that is. Austro-Asiatic? I think that's actually what it's called. Let me just look it up. Hebrew. Sorry, guys. Afro-Asiatic, not Austro-Asiatic. That's Vietnamese. Yeah, Afro-Asiatic. Also Aramaic and those kinds of Middle Eastern. Phoenician. That's actually where the Hebrew comes from. It comes from the Phoenician languages.
I've heard of Phoenician. I just didn't know where it came, what it meant. Marcus says it went the other way in Louisiana. They wanted intelligent design. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I can imagine.
Free Xenu Project comment on God telling Abraham to kill his son. It was a bet with the devil that Abraham would actually do it.
That's right.
So
it
he
was.
told him to do it over a bet. Wow.
Yeah.
Isn't that
Job?
Yeah.
Job as well.
Isn't that in some way? Oh, poor
that
Job.
was Job.
I was gonna say, isn't that in some way similar to the devil went down to Georgia? Isn't there a whole bet with a violin and stuff there?
I've heard that song a couple times. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that song.
Also, Free Xenu Project. I think whenever Aaron comes into a chat, everyone should type Aaron in the chat, like when Norm comes into the bar at Cheers.
That's a good idea.
Absolutely. It's too bad you can't hear us all going Aaron.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Totally.
Here's our Afro-Asiatic.
Yeah, that's right.
There she got it.
Afro, and then there's Austro-Asiatic. Yeah. But yeah, we English have a common ancestor with Hindi, which is so kind of cool, I think.
Number 5.
And yeah, my interview with apostate. Yeah.
Put up.
I don't think I've seen that one. I didn't know.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen it either.
Yeah. Oh, here's an Aaron. Hi.
Weird.
He's the Aaron. Yeah.
Right.
That's right.
That's funny.
That's funny.
Joel missed most of the chat, but life came a calling.
That happens.
That
happens.
Hard to watch.
We do something a lot of people don't do here on these shows. We record them, and you can watch them again over and over. Unlike others who they're just gone.
Oh no!
Forever.
Yeah, nobody else does.
And with that, I have to. Oh, where did it go?
Oh,
I had just gotten an awesome comment, and it just vanished.
Oh,
Mark is awesome. No, that's
that was it.
Mark is awesome. I was going to say, Steve-O, you are a riot. I'll take that.
Self-serving.
But absolutely. But in reality, yes. Mark is very awesome.
All right, I'll let you click for a while.
Oh, no, my finger's starting to cramp, of course.
Oh, come
on. But that means I have to read them now because we don't have anything in star. Oh, we do have a starred one.
I have a couple of them.
Is this one legit? Phoenicians is also where the Greek alphabet came from. The Greeks took a Phoenician abugida and used the letters they didn't need for vowels instead. Then, of course, Greek inspired Latin. Okay, yeah. There's Phoenicianisms. Joe's comment continued, hence how people started writing vowels. Oh, got it. Whereas in Phoenician, Arabic, and Hebrew, short vowels are not written. You got me going on Geek Rant now.
Oh, I can talk about languages all day, too. It's one of the things I study in history of languages. So, yeah.
We might have a new weekly show here. Joe Giuseppo and Mark Turi, Languages Through Time.
There you go. Hey,
I'd sure as heck watch.
Joe Giuseppo has a channel. She has a channel and a podcast.
Wow.
So we're gonna.
Why aren't we pimping?
I know, right?
Stuff?
If she wants to hop on, she can even hop on now if she wanted to.
Joe, send us some links and we'll pimp your stuff. That's what our fantastic moderators love to do, and we
beautiful mandolins, guitars, stringed instruments.
Oh.
So she's crafty and anti-culty.
Wow,
that's what we like.
Very nice. Crazy John T says, "Fun fact: Hail Xenu is universal." That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Hail Xenu.
Hail Xenu.
My homeboy.
Yeah, right. I just want to promote that the Denver Stevo channel will soon be selling Xenu Nation merchandise.
Nice.
Thanks to the friend of the channel, hashtag Linda P. Golan, who came up with the slogan. But yeah, we'll have some great stuff coming out. Joe DiSeppo again, comment. Mark Turi, high five to another language geek. Yeah.
High five.
High five.
Nice.
Very cool.
Well, he was a member of the Galactic Confederacy, so whatever was standard over there, I guess.
Yeah.
Probably English.
Right, yeah. English before English was English. Yeah.
Yep.
Right. And that language became the basis for Tijiakian, I believe.
There's a lot of evidence pointing to that. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got who makes guitars, and the answer is
Joe DiSeppo.
Joe DiSeppo does.
Oh wow.
And she's a linguist, and she's got all kinds of amazing talents. Very smart. Oh, look who's in the house.
Hey.
Alicia. The greatest daughters of Dianetics. Marilyn, Chad, Never Stevo. Mark, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hey girl, hey. I'm so happy to see everybody.
I was sitting here going, how can you always tell who it is? How do you know that's Alicia?
It says E.
I see the E. I got the E.
Oh,
sorry,
I didn't know
Alicia.
either. Okay.
Right. And Vanessa doesn't do a V, I believe.
She does sometimes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just know by how they say how they talk.
Okay.
I'm just kidding.
Right.
Xeno spoke basic. A Free Xeno
Sure,
project.
basic.
Free Xeno project would know this. Xeno spoke basic, which is English in the Star Wars universe.
And I was just going to actually say something about Star Wars universe.
Star Wars,
which takes place a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, but
far
they
away.
speak basic, which is English. Yeah.
Right. 95 million years ago, no doubt. Tijiakis. That's right. That's right, Apostate, Alex.
I love it.
Miss Kim said, I also thought there was a council in Alexandria where they discussed, fought, and agreed which books to include in the Bible when putting it together. That's how we list books of the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's it. Alexandria, maybe Nicaea, something like that. But yeah, there were councils, a couple of them back in the day, and yeah, they picked and chose. And from what I understand, they limited the rules of women because there actually were books that were dedicated to, like in there's a couple of them in the quote unquote Old Testament or Hebrew Bible. We have the Book of Ruth. And Ruth is very prominent in when we learn about Purim, which is a holiday, and so women prophets are all over all around Judaism, I think unfortunately they limited the contributions to female prophets that were around at the time.
And what's that? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just saying Ruth was considered a prophetess. I didn't because I remember the story of Ruth and Naomi and.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure. I've heard that before because there's the whole thing with Purim.
Makes sense.
And I think if I'm not mistaken, because I've learned I take these classes like every week, like just because I don't know. I never grew up very religious. So I think it's Ruth where God is not mentioned. Like there's a book where God is not mentioned among the prophets, and I think it's in Ruth. If I'm mistaken, could be mistaken with another person, but yeah. Anyway, Purim is kind of cool. It's not like Halloween, but people think it is because we dress up. But it's another one where it has to do with the Persians. The Persians are invading, and so it's actually really kind of cool.
Ruth, there is a verse in Ruth that says, "Your people are my people, and your God is my God." So God is mentioned, but I don't know if that's really a big mention. I mean, God didn't really do anything. God didn't really do anything in that book that I can remember, but there is a verse. I know. I'm sorry. I know way more. I know way more of the Bible than I really ever wanted to know or ever care to admit.
Yeah, I'm just starting, so it's like I'm getting things confused, maybe a little here and there, and But yeah, there are people who are Christians who definitely know more about my book than I do. So
Yeah,
I'm
I
trying to
just don't
get back
remember.
into it and like read it and stuff. So yeah, again,
I used to know a lot of the
apologize if I get anything
actual.
wrong.
No, I used to know a lot of the book and verse, but I haven't not cracked the Bible in over
Yeah.
10 years, and I don't really care to. Just saying,
Yeah,
I'm
I hear
kind
ya.
of, but it does come back to me. We've got choo-choo trains and volcanoes. We're taking
Nice.
the
Right.
midnight train.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
last one that was up on screen that got pulled off,
Oh,
Jeff
what
had
happened?
mentioned that the Council of Nicaea is what had canonized. It was the council that canonized the Bible.
Oh,
So,
did we lose it?
yeah,
Okay.
it's all good.
Okay. Sorry, this was sort of an inside joke. But let me see if I can
Nice.
find it.
Way inside.
Way inside. Inside outside.
I mean, I couldn't remember the exact facts. I mean, that's how we lost books in the Bible. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
And there's
Back
also
in the,
something called
go for it.
there was also something called the Gnostic Bible.
Yeah.
The Gnostic Bible is something that has a whole bunch of different books that the Gnostics, who were groups of Christians after 1st and 2nd century, after Common Era, and they had their own books, and I think a lot of those didn't make it into the Bible. Like I think there's a book of Philip. I believe there's also a lot more that has to do with Mary Magdalene. So it's kind of cool, kind of interesting
Now,
stuff.
were those translated from the Dead Sea Scrolls, or that's what no?
I don't think
that-
they were translated from the Dead Sea Scrolls. No,
Okay.
I think those are two different things. They were groups, they were denominations that were Christians,
Okay.
but then the church called them heretics, and so they basically destroyed their denominations. But I think relatively similar to the Dead Sea Scrolls, because the Dead Sea Scrolls, of course, were buried in a cave, I want to say, somewhere out in the desert. I think the Gnostic text had something similar like that. Like
Yeah.
I believe that they were unearthed several years after. So anyway, kind of cool what people lose over history, because it just gives more and more perspectives onto what was going on. So yeah, they did make it into the Bible. Yeah.
Right.
And if you
Right.
believe going back to the movie Dogma, if you believe that Kevin Smith's story, Jesus's adolescent years were all pulled from the Bible as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
When he was a troublemaker and young Jesus.
Yep. All right. I will be right back. I hear my dog scratching. I just gotta let him out real quick. I'll be right back.
Let's see what else we got here. Oh, hey, Core of Discovery Y2K. I didn't see you in here. Good morning. Afternoon.
The Book of Esther. The Book of Esther does not mention God, and I might have Ruth and Esther mixed up. Anyway, apologies to the people out there who know more than me.
That's right.
That's all good.
Miss Kim points out, like in Star Wars, everyone speaks English.
Yep.
Yeah, but it's a universal
Trek,
translator thing, right? It's
it's in the ear.
Yep. But right. But
Yep.
I don't think that was a thing initially.
No, I think it's obviously it would be very difficult to come up with all the different languages for all the different people. So it actually makes sense. And I love Star Trek Deep Space Nine. And there's really good episode where the Ferengis, Quark and all them, they go down to Earth, which is in the past, and their universal translators don't actually work. So they don't know what the people are saying. And they're speaking what they call Ferenginese, which is a great word, and everyone else is speaking English and they don't understand. It's hysterical. I love it.
Funny.
Here's just for clarification. Joe Giuseppe points out Xenu spoke Esperanto. Of course. Of course.
Universal language.
Nice.
That's right. Okay, we were there. Here's a comment. We did that one. Sorry, Joe. Or sorry, Miss Kim. In that case, make that go away. About 235 AD, they threw out Judith, who was awesome. Okay. Okay. I have nothing to say about that. I didn't know that. Free Xenu Project. I was always interested in the fact that they called Mary Magdalene possibly being Jesus's wife, as she was called his companion, which in that time meant wife or husband.
Yeah.
Also, he kissed her on the lips.
And from what I understand, in one class that I took a while ago, in Greek, the same word for little girl is also virgin. So they're not really sure if Mary, the mother of Jesus, was a virgin or a little girl. And so it was made to be one way. I guess they had to pick. So that's also something that a lot of even Christian Bible scholars will have a lot of, topics and debates on. So it's actually, again, kind of a cool thing, I think. And interesting how translation can be made and used and so forth. So it's kind of cool.
Right, absolutely.
Absolutely.
The joys of language.
Yeah.
Jeff points out, yes, it was canonized patriarchal. Yeah. And dismiss scriptures as the Book of Mary Magdalene. I didn't know there was a Book of Mary Magdalene. I guess I didn't know there were a lot of these books that there weren't. So here's me learning. But
Same here.
But yeah. That's me singing to fill in the time. Okay, Lone Dinosaur 13, Name of the Rose was in first person from what I can remember. Okay, I didn't remember. I just knew Umberto Eco did write in second person from time to time, and I was discovering second person right around the time of the book Bright Lights, Big City, which was made into a not that good movie, and that book was also written in second person as well, which really pulls you into the story. So I didn't recall if Name of the Rose was so, but. Lone Dinosaur, thank you. Here's a comment from Joe. Happy to join if you'd like. Send me a link or email or however. We'll wrap up on, or we're probably coming to the tail end of this one. But when we do, I think that there is a conversation to be had. So Joe, we're absolutely not dismissing the idea at all. I think it's great. We'd love to bring you in and learn languages, especially especially the languages of religion and how languages have spread. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Number 5 in letter A. I heard that recently. They recently discovered what they call a cult of Mary temple in the Middle East. I wish I could remember details, but it was interesting. The concept of that is interesting, let alone whatever any details are. So, we'll have to discover that. We'll have to investigate. And please, if number 5, if you do some more investigating or find what you've got, that would be very very cool to find out. The debate of all times: Babylon 5 is greater than Deep Space Nine.
Completely disagree.
I love me some Deep Space Nine.
I don't know. Deep Space Nine is brilliant.
It is.
I love Babylon 5. Deep Space Nine is
so
brilliant.
Good. What was
and
your favorite character?
I understand. My favorite character is probably Kira Nerys, because she is absolutely amazing. She is a badass. She goes through so much on that show. My favorite episode of Deep Space Nine is Duet from season 1, which is when the Cardassian comes to the station. It's supposed to be guard Tarheel, and the whole thing of the camps and the whole. It's such an amazing episode. It's probably
we could do a whole stream on that. We could do a whole stream on Deep Space Nine. That would be really funny.
What you learn in Deep Space Nine is profoundly, incredibly valuable. History, religion, politics, terrorism, nationalism, morality, science, secularism. I could go on.
What do you say, Chad and Steve-O? Let's do it.
when it's absolutely.
And again, I love Babylon 5. But
I do too.
In my opinion, my subjective opinion, Star Trek Deep Space Nine is a gem. If people, you have to stick with it. I understand. Like I understand that part of it. If you stick with it, it's brilliant.
I love
Brilliant
when
show.
Wei-Yun comes in. Wei-Yun is that kind of elf-looking clone guy, and he just keeps coming back, and he's got these like evil eyes that it just cracks me up. I'm sorry, but that's
Yeah.
No, don't be
like
sorry. We're talking about a show that I love. I could
Right.
talk
Yeah,
about I could talk about
Wei-Yun
it
is
and
great,
on
man.
and
Not a doubt.
I-
Yeah,
I-
the
if
second
I
half
was
of
to
that
s-
series is fantastic. I mean, the first half is
Yeah.
great, but when
Second half
when
is
it rolls to the second half of that series, it's
buckle your
just boom, it's
seatbelt.
amazing.
Yeah.
and
It's,
I've
It
said
is.
this once. I'll say it again. If I wasn't Jewish, I would be a member of the Bajoran religion.
oh,
Like I
yeah.
would be. I would make it happen. You know, and I would wear the ring. Like, anywho,
The earring, yeah, the earring.
why
yeah.
not? You know,
I just think it's so funny how I mean I get the whole humanoid thing, but they put a couple lines on the nose and put an earring in the ear, and presto, you're Bajoran.
well, one of the things that Star Trek, and again, we're maybe diverting a little bit. Every race in Star Trek, every species in Star Trek that's humanoid, is a symbol of us as human beings.
Yeah.
So the Bajorans, who are like my favorite race, are our spiritual side and our ancient side. Vulcans are our logical side. Klingons are our warlike side. Romulans are our deceptive side. So every single species is supposed to be human because they're supposed to be us. And then, of course, we all come from the same place, which is we all come from the changelings, essentially.
Right.
Which is what we find out in the next generation.
I mean, even from the
Bajor
Bajor
beginning,
for Bajorans. That's a little bit too much for me. When you go to Bajor for Bajorans, I'm not a Bajoran nationalist. You know, they have a religious theocracy, not really into Kai Wynn, but we'll debate that. We'll debate the merits of Bajoran nationalism.
OBG Foster, I believe it was 7 seasons of Deep Space Nine.
Yeah.
Kai
was
Wynn
seven.
was the fundamentalist dictator, slash
There's
witch
Ratchet.
of it all. Yeah, yeah.
I'm much a Kai Opaka fan. Loved Kai Opaka.
Huh?
I would ride the moon with Kai Opaka. Kai Wynn, horrible person.
Yeah.
And I
It's
always
just
look
amazing,
look forward to Gul
okay.
Dukat.
Gul Dukat, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, he was
Gul.
the
Oh.
Kardashian. Yeah.
And
But
Garrett-
even his arc, his storyline, his development throughout those seasons was I mean all of it.
And
I was excited because I got to see more of Chief O'Brien, who I enjoyed from the little bits of Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Yeah.
It was great when Worf came back, and
Yes.
all of a sudden you're seeing Worf develop more. And then so to have some characters that we knew and were close to, but then to understand the
some of the
pain and
2D stuff was sort of annoying, though. I thought his wife was annoying because she was always like nagging him,
Keiko,
yeah.
And then all of a sudden, like towards the end, everyone started hooking up and everything. I don't know. It's just weird.
But I will always remember Zial and the sacrifice that she made on DS9. That, of course, was Gul Dukat's half Bajoran, half Cardassian daughter. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Zial, wonderful. If I have a daughter, I will probably name her Zial. I don't care what the other children will say.
Wow.
I love Zial. Love it.
Best Star Trek ship ever. The whole Star Trek series, the whole franchise, everything, even from the beginning, having Nichelle Nichols in there and having just all these, they were pioneers in so many ways of their day, but just tackling those subjects, even all the way through. Just Gene Roddenberry was just a genius.
He's brilliant.
Yeah.
That's a science fiction writer.
Now, yeah.
Hubbard,
actually with a conscience. Yeah.
Yeah.
That guy.
Yeah. Socially active, knew what he was talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. Star Trek makes me cry.
Sometimes me too. When
Marcus, you're such a sensitive guy.
Like Sesame Street for nerds. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It really is. It really is.
Yeah. Also,
That's
Cal
great.
Hudson. I'll never ever forget the sacrifice that Cal Hudson made for his beliefs, even though I disagree with the Maquis. He did what he had to do,
Yeah.
We can go on and on and on. I'm sure. I think Chad, maybe are you a Star Trek fan at all, Chad?
Not that I'm not a fan, but I never really got a chance to watch it growing up.
Yeah.
I was more into Knight Rider.
Knight Rider. I love
yeah.
Knight Rider.
I
I didn't get to watch
well.
much TV, but I did binge Star Trek like later on,
Yeah.
majorly.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Free
Especially
Xeno Project
size,
comment.
quantity, yeah. Quality, not quantity. Amen.
Yeah. C.O. Belf, our buddy.
Oh.
This adult nerd does not need a substitute for Sesame Street. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't beat Sesame
That's for cookie. There you go. See you, Bill.
Yeah.
Sesame Street. Hi, ho, Kermit the Frog here.
Oh, that's great.
This is great.
I was looking for letter A and number 5 because I was going to say this episode is brought to you by, but I can't
Oh,
see it.
yeah.
Letter A and number 5. Yeah.
That's funny.
That's
someone's
right.
talking. Is Mrs. J in the chat?
She may have been. I thought I saw her. Yes, she is. Or was.
Where you at,
Yeah,
Mrs. J?
Pretty recently.
Mrs. J, not seeing any of it.
No.
It's okay.
Hey, Mrs.
This
J.
time.
I love this time of day because we get so many of the UK people. You know, Mrs. J recommend the Next Generation. That's a good one. Yeah.
I usually start in season 3, but because I almost always start with season 3. But I would start, if you're a first-time viewer, with season 1, and then try like the Next Generation. I love the original series, but I would say try it after because it can be a little cheesy, and the 3rd season is not good.
The paper, the paper mache rocks and stuff, but the messages in it is really good. And
it has its charm. First 2 seasons are really good, and then I mean, Next Generation, at least through 3 through 6 seasons, are unbelievable. They're so good. Yeah. They will always be my favorite, even though like DS9 is a close second. My favorite TNG episode is in the 3rd season. It's called The Defector, with Admiral Jurok, who defects, played by who defects. So also, never forget what Jurok did. Mm-hmm. Yep.
This is sorry. Who was
doubling again?
Oh, here we go. I love Xindi, Enterprise, especially when they're fighting the Xindi. Yeah, the Enterprise had the same problem as pretty much all of the Next Generation era Star Treks did. The first couple seasons were a little rougher. Even Deep Space Nine, it takes a season or so to build. But and Enterprise, and then there's we just won't talk about Voyager. But Enterprise, same thing, right? The first couple seasons, they maybe stretched out exposition and kind of world building a little too much for something we already understood. And then when that Xindi War came, you're absolutely right. That was one of the that was certainly their greatest point, without a doubt. And I did enjoy that too. So
do you remember I don't know what season in Voyager that 7 of 9 came in, but I love me some 7 of 9. I have a huge girl crush on her. So that was the
I think it was 3 or 4.
3 or 4. Yeah, it was later on, but to me, like she basically saved the whole series. I love her.
I like the saying that Astrometrics was basically just the place where 7 of 9 gave PowerPoint presentations to the crew.
A big map,
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And I love how she was just so deadpan. Like she was treating the Borg children that kind of were human, half part. I can't remember some of the things she said, but it was just so funny. You know, she was like trying to be nurturing, but it wasn't working too well.
Right. C.O. Bilf says Q from Star Trek: The Next Generation is basically LRH if OT abilities were real. Yeah, right?
Yeah. Oh, my God.
It's true. It's very true.
Yeah.
A lot of people like Q, but I thought he was the most annoying.
Yeah, I don't like Q. Not my favorite.
No, he had his moments. He had his moments, but...
I like the space stuff, and he always got into the holodeck kind of stuff, and I like this. I like the space stuff.
Right.
You know,
Right.
that was my thing. So I was trying to pop up some more of the actual questions that were the reason we were here. The religious stuff. Crazy John T statement. I've heard theory that the wedding where Jesus turned water into wine was in fact his wedding to Mary, and the host was Mary's father, Mary Magdalene, I assume.
Mary Magdalene.
His mother was Mary. That makes me cringe just because, like, maybe it's a trigger, but it, like, the Bible was so literal to suggest that Jesus was married or had any, like, he was celibate, he was perfect, never sinned, never indulged, never did anything. That's what I was taught, but that's interesting. That's interesting. Might be true. What do you guys think?
Who knows? I like the theory that during the time that we don't see Jesus, which was mentioned by Steve-O in the movie Dogma, it's like 20 years or something, we don't see Jesus. There's a theory that he went to India and studied Buddhism, because there's a lot of parallels between Jesus and Buddha, and also in the Catholic orders, and the Buddhist orders are very similar. So again, could be completely coincidental, probably is, but I like to toy around with the idea and think, yeah, you learn Buddhism, maybe.
From the time he was 12 till the time he was 33, yeah, that makes sense.
Who knows?
We know he was a carpenter, but he could have done that anywhere.
Yeah, or a missionary, a Buddhist missionary. They did go to the Middle East quite often. Buddhism was quite common along the Silk Road, which of course was after this. But you know, there were Buddhists in the Turkic lands and in some of the Middle East. So who knows?
Question: isn't there a book of Judas?
Judas.
I don't know.
And I know that when I was just a quick correction, when I was referring to the book of Ruth, I meant the book of Esther. I'm getting those mixed up because again, I'm just learning them. So the book of Esther, she
that makes
is a prophet. She's a prophet.
She's a prophetess.
God is not mentioned.
She became
Purim
queen.
comes from there.
Yeah, she became the queen. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Right.
I get, again. I'm for me again. When it's funny how when people grow up learning about the Bible, they know so much about it. I know nothing about it. I'm just learning now at 40 some of these stories. So
well, you know the history, which I don't know any of. I just got the scripture burned into my head. I had the entire book of like First Corinthians memorized, the entire book. Yeah. Now I could maybe recite the love chapter. That's about it. Yeah, it's insane.
Wow.
Alex K. In German, the word for virgin is also, how do you pronounce that?
Jungfrau.
Jungfrau.
Yep.
Literally translated is young woman.
Yep.
That makes sense.
All right.
Jeff. Somebody want to read that? There's a lot of stuff I can't. Looks like Catholic books, right?
I was going to offer, but like you said, it's a lot of stuff that's
removed. Okay.
The Apocrypha, including Tobit, Judith, Wisdom, Sirach, Baruch, 4 books of Maccabees, 1 and 2 Esdras, Prayer of Manasseh, Enoch, Jubilees, Jasher, Psalm 151, and Daniel and Esther are removed in the 1800s.
Oh, wow.
Thanks for the info.
Denver Steve-O, I appreciate the that you mentioned, that Baruch. I like
Baruch.
that. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Wow.
Baruch Hashem Adonai. Is it
a lot better than I could have did.
What does that mean? Baruch Hashem Adonai is like God.
Baruch Hashem means blessed be to God. When we start most of our prayers, we say Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam. That's essentially like blessed be the Lord, sometimes called King of the Universe, and then it kind of goes on from there. But but I appreciate the ha. The ha is always welcome, Steve-O.
My pleasure. unless it's phlegm. Jude was a 30-year-old Jew. I think we can presume he was married. Oh
Yeah.
boy.
I'm a 40-year-old Jew. I'm not married, but it is a different time.
Yeah.
True. Yeah, very true. A
Right.
30-year-old Jew was like old back then. So.
Oh, yeah. This is a good point, Lori in Georgia. I think we're lucky that Gene Roddenberry didn't want to form his own religion. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he would have.
He was a secular humanist, so I don't think he was interested in it. But, that's him.
Right.
Yeah, I probably would have joined his.
Yeah,
C.O. Belf. Okay, C.O. Belf, what you got for us? I'm not trying to Bible thump or anything, but most mainstream scholarship, even from atheists, holds that the New Testament texts are from the 1st century and most of the Gnostic stuff is later.
Later, yeah, okay. Mm-hmm.
No, it's not Bible thumping. That's fine.
It's knowledge passing.
Yeah.
I love Riker.
Riker.
Yes.
Which Riker though? Will or his clone brother?
I kind of have sympathy for the Maquis, so
Yeah.
I
was a little surprised he went that way, but yeah.
Yeah. Have you all seen Picard yet?
I only enjoyed the 3rd season, but I loved the 3rd season. First 2 I did not like.
The first one I didn't mind as much. The second one I was so lost, and I was I just skipped over half of it. I was like, yeah.
But the 3rd, and they bring back a particular character. I don't want to spoil, from TNG, and I was like so glad they didn't spoil it, because that episode is one of my favorite episodes of Star Trek of all time.
Really? Yeah,
and I couldn't believe when I finished Picard, I was like, I cannot believe that one episode. I mean, again, I loved all of it, by the way. I enjoyed all, especially the ending. But the one episode where the TNG character in the later seasons comes back, I was like,
I was so happy.
And I'm like, this is like in my top 10.
I'll go back and finish
very
it
happy
then.
Boy.
Yeah.
It's great.
Right.
Yeah.
Crazy John T. statement: in the theory of Jesus studying Buddhism, the Magi from the East that visited him at his birth were Buddhists from India.
Oh,
Makes
cool.
sense. Huh, that's
Could
interesting.
be, right? Who knows?
Yeah. Okay, how do you pronounce this name, Steve-O? Remember? Selena
Kamauer.
Kamauer.
CAE spells K. MAWR sounds like hour, but Mauer. So yep, Selena Kamauer.
You want to read it, Steve-O?
Yeah.
You pronounce her name so well.
Having no experiences is not how you learn how to live. Agreed. My compassion mostly comes from having made mistakes, getting into difficulties, and dealing with turmoil, not from perfection, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, if you get, I like to say, make failure your friend, and because it happens, it's unavoidable. And why failure exists is to teach us lessons that we can't learn in any other way. So again, our parents can dictate our own path, and they can set our path forward, or society, or a church, or whatever. But making mistakes, you'll fall flat on your face. When I left Scientology and I had to tell people I was a Scientologist, or an ex-Scientologist, very hard thing to do. But you know what I mean? I said it. I took pride in it. A couple of years I didn't want to tell people, but now I'm like, screw it. Yeah, it was maybe a mistake. Maybe I failed at it, but I've had a lot of opportunities, being here and being in other places that I wouldn't have had I not gone through it. So make failure your friend, embrace your mistakes, and learn from them.
Agreed. I would assume that the reason they took I'm agreeing with the movie Dogma, as if it wasn't just a movie. I would assume that if the adolescent years, the oops, I made mistakes years of Jesus Christ were removed, it was because the Bible crafters were looking for that sign of perfection. They were looking for that exalted being that bridged humanity and the perfection of God, which would make sense, right? You need that character, and so okay, that this character is the Son of God, therefore he is perfect, blah 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 blah. But even if you look at entertainment these days, and you look at movies that have been made about Jesus or about, good people, right? Even good cops, whatever it is, they always have their flaws, and they're always imperfect beings that are striving for perfection. So I think over the course of 2,000 years, whatever the case may be here, what we look for in a being to support, in a person to support, follow, rally behind, emulate, has changed. So back then, the nearly perfect being is what was wanted to be emphasized, and therein lies the Jesus Christ we know in the books. Now we want an imperfect being, therefore. Our Jesus Christ could be Olivia Benson from Law and Order SVU, or it could be Captain Picard. It could be whomever, right? They're not perfect beings, but they certainly are good beings striving to be perfect. So but I agree. I think that's what we want, is somebody who has made mistakes, because we make mistakes.
Luke Skywalker's a big one. Right? Look from the original trilogy to the most current trilogy. I know I didn't love the most current trilogy, but his character was interesting. I actually didn't mind. I mean, it wasn't great, but some of the stuff, because he's a hero, he's perfect, he does everything right, he's inherited this thing. Okay, I has to train for the Force, whatever. But he's pretty much put into the driver's seat, right? And then you get to the third one, and it's like, oh, he wants to kill his nephew, and he's making mistakes, and people freaked out because
that's not our Luke Skywalker.
They didn't look at him. They didn't look at him as someone who could make mistakes. Anyway.
And that's why I always loved Han Solo, because you knew that he was a rogue. You knew that he had a checkered past. You knew that he wasn't perfect, but his arc, he kept getting better as he went along, and that was something to follow. So, Free Xenu Project comments. I have to say, Data is one of the best.
I love Data. Yeah, that's true.
Right.
Totally.
Yeah.
The episode Data's Day from season 3, 4, whatever it is. Data's Day is fantastic. One of the best episodes. I used to watch it on syndication all the time.
I gotta watch that again.
Lovely
Yeah.
And actually, that's the first time we meet Keiko. And there's a lot of little cool tidbits about that episode, but I love it. Yeah.
My favorite scene, I think, with Data is when Q gets deified, like he's human all of a sudden, right? And so he's just like, I've never had to eat before. So he's like, Data's taking him around, and they go into what's the one with where Whoopi Goldberg is, that
10 forward.
10 forward.
Oh, 10 forward, yeah. And he's like, do you like this stuff or whatever? And he's like, Data's just so matter of fact. He's like, something like, I do not require nutritional substance, but sometimes I ingest like non-nutritive silicone-based non-nutritive medium. Oh my god! But he says it in such a robotic. So like we gotta have this joke in the house. Is like, what's for dinner? Is like, oh, non-nutritive silicone-based medium, and you'll like every bit of it.
Brent Spiner is a comedic genius, and the way he took that. I mean, he's had that inherent timing forever. I mean, I remember watching him on episodes of Night Court back in the early 80s. And when he showed up on Star Trek The Next Generation, completely honestly, I didn't recognize him at first, but then I went, oh, that's that guy. It's just this amazing timing, and to be able to, not just be the funny guy, the funny part, but to take really those dramatic parts and those, he made Data fantastic. So without a doubt.
Yeah.
Joe asks, I've never seen Star Trek or Star Wars. Is there a point where I get declared and disconnected? LOL.
Nice.
Probably, but
you want me, but I don't have the energy. So
yeah, we won't call you out on it. We're we're all declared for something here. So
a lot of Trekkies in the house. Comment: No Xenu would be Borg, I think.
Yeah.
They are
No,
Borg.
he doesn't want to assimilate everybody, does he? Oh, I guess he threw them all in that glycol.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Maybe it means no Xenu, like without Xenu, we would be Borg. You know what I mean?
I don't know.
Good question.
Xenu's hip, man. Xenu's my homeboy. I don't.
Somebody want to tackle that one? I gotta need some water. Somebody want to read that one?
Joe says, comment, I find it fascinating how human religions trend towards a, what is that word?
Pantheon.
Pantheon. Even if a religion has one good god or no god, there arises a pantheon of saints, Buddhists, prophets, deities, and equivalents.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Very true. Angels, saints, prophets, they're very similar to a pantheon. Pantheon is like if we think of the pagan
Many.
gods in Greece and Rome, all of their gods are part of the pantheon. So like Saturn and Mars and the Greeks, they had Zeus and they had, Hades and all that. So they had this big thing. And the Hindus have a pantheon and today and so forth. But yeah, you're right. There's an equivalent, I think, because there's got to be some meaning there, I guess,
Yeah,
whatever
that's a really good point. Going back to some of the fundamental groups, like the one that I came out of, is that prophetic bent of you need to be able to hear from God and interpret the scriptures, and that the dogmatic way of dictating God's will. I always had a hard time figuring out what God's will was, but Marlene knew what God's will was. So, because she was a prophetess, and she literally would go to this place, it was called the Weston Priory, and she wasn't Catholic or anything. She grew up Catholic, but she would just go up to this what do you call? I'm where the monks live. What is that called?
Monastery?
Monastery. Duh, monastery. Yeah, monks. And yeah, it was just really quiet, beautiful grounds, and she would go and seek the Lord, and then come home and tell us that we usually had to fast for 10 days because we were evil.
Wow.
Yeah, but that's a good point. Is that it's a replacement for a pantheon? Many gods. It's like you're deifying people.
Right. This one's interesting from Selena. Did you know that the Klingon language is based on the Welsh language? True story.
Yeah, I've heard that, and also a little Icelandic as well.
Okay.
Interesting.
Just because the Welsh are inaudible.
Celtic languages are crazy. They're far out, man. I love them.
Yeah. Witness says, "Yikes! I'm interested in like 5 different topics I want to research after this stream."
Awesome.
That's what you get for listening to us on a Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, you have time. Rabbit holes await.
And we will. You don't have to click down the rabbit holes when you're with us. We'll take you there ourselves.
Yeah.
Free Xenu Project comment: if Q was LRH, if OT levels were real, then Xenu would be the Romulan race. Mark, what do you think?
Well, I got to tell you something. After the Bajorans, the Romulans are my absolute favorite species, race in Star Trek.
Good.
So I'm offended that you have made the connection of Xenu with Romulans, because the Romulans are not evil. Okay.
Really?
The Romulans might be treacherous, but they're not evil. They have a different culture than you and I, where calculating, manipulation, moving the chess. It's like, remember what Picard said, when you're with the Romulans, it's like playing a game of chess. You always have to be one step ahead. That's their culture. I love that culture. I love it. I love the way that they're so passive aggressive. If you ever see, like, there's a guy on Babylon 5, the Greek guy, who played a Romulan all the time, Commander Tarbok or Tarek or whatever his name was. Whenever he would come on screen, him and Picard would have a chess game. Oh, I see you're in our space. Well, we'll invite you to go back. Love it. So no, Xenu is not a Romulan. That is offensive to my wanting to be a half Bajoran, half Romulan nature. Don't worry about it. I know it's fictional. But
Mark,
to
I
me,
love how
Xenu,
passionate you are about all this. We got to do a Star
Yeah,
Trek.
that's
I grew up
great.
with this stuff. I grew up with this stuff. But I would say if Xenu was anything, yeah, I don't know. I would say maybe Cardassian because I don't like the Cardassians. So there you go.
Here's Free Xenu's clarification. That was my point, though. Xenu isn't evil. He tried to fix an
Yeah.
overpopulation problem through. So
Yeah.
Yep.
maybe a
I
little.
think I can see. I see Xenu more as a Cardassian. But then again, if you see him as a Romulan, go right ahead. I'm just telling you my opinion. We can see it differently. There's no
he
bad
was
blood.
crafty and calculating because he
True.
kind of tricked them into the boxes because they were being audited by, of course, all of the space operas and the religion, Scientology religion has to do with the IRS and taxes and stuff.
Right.
Like the
Yes,
Duke
that's
of
what they
Chuck.
were there for. Yeah, Xenu was a psychiatrist, and they came in for tax audits. I am not well versed. I don't know the Romulan perspective on tax audits. I can't tell you. I don't know. I'm not that well versed. So if someone out there knows what the Romulans think of taxes, then we can go one step further. But until then, I don't know.
Let's see if we can get in touch with some of the writers.
Star Trek was my only escape besides playing guitar and drugs and girls.
Nice.
That's a good combination.
Star Trek's right up there.
Yeah, it's a perfect combination.
That's a 4-Pete I can get on too.
Yeah.
Star Trek
and pizza every once in a while. A little nourishment.
Cool. Why not? Yeah. Do what you want, but not around me.
Yeah, Mock says the Catholic buildings are amazing to get a bit of inner peace. Not into the Catholicism, but love the buildings. Yeah, that architecture is just wow, right? I mean,
yeah,
that's sometimes why I go to. Yeah, that's why I went to movies like the Tom Hanks ones where it was, I forget the book ones,
Da Vinci Code,
the Da Vinci Code stuff. Not that I didn't enjoy, because I enjoyed the books, but to watch the movies and see them, in all of those beautiful places, it's like, yeah, I mean, it is. It's my cheap way of getting to Europe. So
I knew this question was going to come up.
There's actually a meme that says the difference between the Cardassians and the Kardashians is that one is a sleazy reptilian species and the other are the Cardassians. So
nice. That's funny.
That's
funny.
It was bad.
Cardassians, whatever.
It was bad timing for the Cardassians to appear in Star Trek because, all of a sudden there are the Kardashians, and you're like, no, not the same.
It's fine.
We oddly like the Cardassians.
I don't have a very good high moral. I point my moral nose down to the Cardassians because of my fantasizing of being a half Bajoran. So just a thing, I guess.
Yeah.
Compare away, if you must.
So yes, kind of, Joe. See you, Bill.
Who is this man who breaks bread even with SPs and tax collectors? Are you talking about Mark? I don't know. Yeah, that was said about Jesus that he hung out with the tax collectors and
that's true. LRH and Jesus probably would not have been friends.
No, LRH and Jesus would not have gotten along because Jesus didn't have 5 houses with all these, and cool cigarettes and all those clothes and servants and messengers and.
Hey, Selena says, as someone who is autistic, I am not sure which Star Trek race I relate myself to the most. Romulan, the Borg. Am I half human child of Spock? I've never had so many options.
Well, I wouldn't. That's a tough one. I don't think there really is one particularly. Like, again, it's probably something because back when some of the species and races were being constructed, people really didn't know much about autism, right? And also autism representation in TV is awful. Like Big Bang Theory and The Good Doctor, terrible. horrible representations of autistic people. So, maybe be happy that there isn't. Like I don't even know if Star Trek could do it really well. However, one character, Barclay, seems to be a little bit autistic sometimes.
Very true.
Lieutenant
Very true.
Barclay, like he's got some symptoms. And a lot of the people who would be in Star Trek would be probably high functioning autism, just by way of their abilities to do math and science and be sort of brilliant, but also kind of antisocial a little bit, or not social, I should say. So who knows? Who knows?
This is a great response from Marcus. I introduced my ex-wife to TNG, and she immediately related to Vulcan. She was diagnosed with Asperger's, later changed to ASD.
Okay.
So,
Interesting.
But I think to your point, Selena, you have so many options, and it's watch and where do you feel the most comfortable? Who do you I to be honest, I always wanted to be Captain Kirk, the young Captain Kirk, excuse me, Will Riker, that. But I think that's what most adolescent guys want to be, is that guy. And yeah, as I aged, I started to realize that wasn't where I was. But I'm very happy, being a low morals. I actually fall probably into the Romulan pocket myself too. So, yeah, I'll stab somebody in the back if I have to.
Hey.
Sorry, did we lose?
For the Tal Shiar?
Maybe I won't. Yeah, you're right. Okay, we lost Marilyn for a second here.
All right. Yeah, let's see if she comes back. There
she is. So here's a comment.
Sorry.
The Ferengi in Star Wars is named after the Farsi word Farange, meaning European or foreigner, originally from the word Frankish. Yeah.
Frankish. Wow. That's really cool. And
Language
they are the
nerd,
most Jewish
nerd.
race. They are the most stereotypical Jewish race, unfortunately, whether for good or bad.
The rules of acquisition, was it?
Stereotype. Yeah, what I love about their culture is everything is like hyper capitalistic. So even their funerals, they sell ashes and stuff. And the afterlife has to do with how much wealth you have. It's really interesting, and that you can learn in Deep Space Nine if you choose to watch.
Yeah, what was his name? The Grand Ningus or something like that.
Nagus.
Nagus. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. Hey, I don't mean to be the guy who does the stuff, but I'm probably going to have to drop in a couple here.
Yeah, me too. It's been
it's been 2.5 hours.
Yeah. Let's throw this out there though. Is Wesley Crusher a little autistic? Savant.
Could be. Yeah.
Undiagnosed. I mean.
Yeah.
But, and then C.O. Bilf, I always kind of thought Star Trek did sort of coded representation of autistic people in a way that was maybe just a bit over the top, but definitely well-intentioned.
Yeah. Yeah, at the time, 60s, 70s, 80s, it was a different time, and stereotypes were different, and people's sensibilities were different, and, they wanted to talk about when the AIDS epidemic happened. They wanted to talk about homosexuality. They wanted to talk about AIDS, but they couldn't. And so there is a wonderful episode where they go down to a planet in TNG, and everyone basically is neither male or female. And then there's a person who falls in love with Riker who wants to identify as being more female. And it's a tremendously progressive show for the time. But, they couldn't really deal with it. So they had to do it in different veilings. There's also an episode of the original series with Frank Gorshin. He's part of a race that's half black on one side, half white on the other. He's being hunted by a guy that's got the opposite, and they don't understand. Well, he's got black on a different side, and it was all about racism. So, thinly veiled kind of stuff, and good writing, but also they couldn't address those things, obviously,
Shut up, Wesley. Remember that?
Yeah. Shut up, Wesley.
That's right.
Yeah. Because I love when, Oh God, now I'm losing it. The mother. What's the doctor's name? Can't remember. Oh,
Dr. Beverly Crusher.
Beverly Crusher. She said, yeah, she was like, stop telling my son, stop telling my son what to do, or stop yelling at him or something, because Picard would be like, shut up, Wesley. And then he ignored her, and they both turned around and was like, shut up, Wesley.
Yeah.
I love it.
It's classic.
Wow.
All right, this was fun. We kind of
Thank you.
we kind of digressed a little bit, but that was fun.
Thank you.
It was not digression. It was evolution.
No.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
We went from the past to the future. So
Mm-hmm.
very cool. Well, Mark, again, thank you for 2 wonderful weeks of
Sure.
great.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's,
I know.
it's great to be here.
I know. Witness is going to go back and have to do some research now after
Yes.
this. We've got Witness thinking. And this is a great point. Just to OBG Foster says that's what science fiction is for, telling a story in allegory.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's actually a great tie-in to how we started the conversation today with fundamentalism, literalism of the Bible versus taking the Bible in an allegorical sense, not literal. Mark, we all appreciate it. We love what we will. We would love to have you back again. Not saying you have to come back next week, but I'm saying let's.
Sure.
If we can make this some sort of semi. Hey, let's have this conversation because the audience loves it. The audience enjoys it.
Thank you so much.
Fascinating too.
I mean, when you get to Free Xenu Project talking about Christianity, you're there. And I appreciate with 1,000 thank yous. Joe and Jeff was fantastic. Jeff had some fantastic insights as well. This is a stimulating conversation, and religion in general is. So to go from Scientology and discuss other religions and bring those back into Scientology or bring them into Star Trek or whatever, that's what that's what we know, and that's what I think. That's what we as people enjoy doing, and certainly those who don't want to go outside on a Saturday afternoon. Aaron says, "How about tomorrow?" Dude, I got things tomorrow, man. I got things tomorrow.
This is a good time for me, like you guys said. I don't know about you guys.
Always, Jeff loves the idea. Loves the idea.
Thanks, Jeff.
Of
Thank you so much.
Semi.
I'm open to it. I'm absolutely open to it. So
All right, great. We'll set it up when we end.
Yeah, this also works for me too because it's evening, getting slightly late, but it's not. It's only 9:30. I'm sorry. We're good. It's not late for me at all.
Yeah.
But
well,
yeah,
we never even go
there.
there.
No, it's honestly, it's perfect. I thought it was actually later, to be honest with you. Be having such a great time, so I apologize. But I definitely like the time that we start. It's very comfortable for me as well, and I'm very glad it works for all of you as well who are on different time zones, which works.
We made it work.
Without a doubt. So once again, thank you everybody. Thank you, Julie, in the background for.
Yes, thank you, Julie.
Yep, she does a lot.
So who did I thank in the audience already? Witness, in Theta, Marcus, Joe, Jeff,
thank you, Marcus.
Core of Discovery. Thanks for swinging in.
And thanks to all of our
Witness, CO Bill, if always. If I forgot anybody, that's because I'm stupid enough to start reading names off of the thing, and probably Mock, there we go, OBG Foster. I could go back to the beginning and start reading things. Terry was here for a bunch. We had a great audience, and we will leave it.
Degraded Daughters of Dianetics, one of them.
Degraded Daughters.
And I don't want to forget, thank you to all of our monitors and all of our mods on all the channels.
Absolutely. Yes.
Selena, Crazy John, everybody else. Thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of your Saturday, or if it's approaching Sunday, do that. And everybody on this side, just hang on while we end. And
okay.
And yeah, love you all. Thanks, guys.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.